He weighs the scream of a distant future against a single night sky, feeling a thin place where two magics tangle like frayed rope. He chooses intrusion over patience, because patience costs empires. He etches warp math across an ancient calculus, binding the Astronomicon through his own mind to anchor the jump. He accepts the price, bleed his light or watch a softer world be eaten by a louder one. The breach opens with a sound like a cathedral organ tearing, and he steps through into a castle that thinks. Snow peels off slate roofs in ripples. The Scottish sky becomes a seam of noon yellow daylight torn into midnight, the aurora bent into a cuneiform sigil. Owls scatter in spirals around a silhouette that is not bird, not star, but an idea in gilded armor compressing the air into prayer. Hogwarts castle lifts its many eyes, arrow slits, frosted panes, portraits yawning awake, and feels a visitor with the gravity of a planet. He lands not with impact but intention. Boots touch basalt wet with winter. A ward storm rises from the old stones like breath after a sprint. Gargoyles crack and reform, preferring the new center of mass. The whomping willow shudders, folds its rage tight and stares. A boy in a Gryffindor scarf grips a railing on the astronomy tower and swallows a scream. The golden figure below is taller than Hagrid's tallest tale, a sun caged in steel, a helm with a face more human than any statue, but older than all statues. The boy's wand hand shakes, sparks spit. The wand quiets as if choosing not to intrude. Within the great hall, candles waver. A silver-bearded headmaster rises in one fluid line, blue eyes narrowing to slits of measured wonder. The staff table creaks with a dozen hands braced. Minerva McGonagall's knuckles are bone white against wood. Severus Snape's gaze is flat as a lake on a windless day. The enchanted ceiling burns with the image of the torn sky, then stabilizes into clouds that refuse to be cowed. He moves to the courtyard at the center of it all. Footsteps ring like a metronome. The air refuses to admit any wind not of his walking. He looks up once, measuring the lattice of wards knotted through time by elder founders, layered by teachers, and 1,000 small loves, checking for places where the warp's pressure might find a seam. A student trips near the fountain, the shock of presence making their senses miscount. He raises 2 fingers. Gravity adjusts. Flesh stops a breath above stone. The child floats, pivots, is set upright, feet placed perfectly as if they chose it. No spell words, no flourish, just a correction. Portraits mutter. The founders' painted visages speak in strokes. Salazar's frame stays quiet for too long. A clutch of first years push closer, curiosity outrunning fear. The eldest among them clutches a prefect badge and calculates the line between bravery and idiocy. Hagrid arrives at a run that is mostly shoulder and heart. He stops when the visitor turns. The giant's instincts, be nice to big things, fires and dies at once. Because this is not big. This is vast. Sir, Hagrid says without deciding to. Because sir feels safer than any other noun. The Emperor tastes the word sir and files it with a sidelong tenderness. He tilts his head. He samples the air not for oxygen, but for geometry. Wards, 12 primary, dozens of secondary, sing. A different current moves among them. Magic drawn from will, ritual, lineage. Not the warp, not exactly. Adjacent, friendly to believe. He could break it by being thoughtless. He chooses not to break it. Dumbledore steps into the courtyard. His wand remains holstered but not absent. The holly handle protrudes from a sleeve like a promise. Welcome, he says, voice even, as if greeting a storm inside a glass conservatory. You are uninvited. You are expected. Expected because prophecy is loose rope. Expected because the castle dreams even when its doors are shut. The Emperor does not answer with words. He opens his left hand palm up and shows a hovering lattice, a miniature of the torn sky, lines of force, a distant echo of something calling. The Astronomicon, refracted, intruding as a hum at the edge of hearing. He shows cause and consequence, not apology. The portraits flinch, then lean in, greedy for diagrams. Minerva's eyes flicker. She is a cat, translating calculus into common sense. "Albus," she whispers. "The wards, they flex," Dumbledore replies. "They do not fail." On the astronomy tower, the boy with the scarf watches the ground shift from merely beautiful to arranged. He feels the sudden pressure in his scar, a not quite pain that is a weather report for someone else's storm. He does not fall. He holds the stone and counts the breaths of a world, deciding whether to be more itself. The Emperor lowers his hand. He speaks, and the sound is a room that remembers you. "I am here because something of mine called to something of yours. It should not. It will until I bind it. Your school is a hinge. The door will not care for the hinge if the door is allowed to swing." "Your name?" Dumbledore asks. He does not offer the oldest one. Names are keyways, and this place has too many keys. "A guardian," he says, "of mankind." "Then we have that cause in common," Dumbledore answers, although his gaze slides briefly to the students clustered under arches, and his mouth tightens as if he tastes ash behind the word mankind. From Dumbledore's sleeve, a golden thread of magic slides outward, touches the courtyard stones, and asks the castle a question about hospitality. The castle answers with a low hum that you feel in your teeth. Doors unbar themselves by a hair. The portraits go still like owls when a wolf passes. A chill runs along the ground like a ripple of ink spilled under glass. Not cold from winter, cold from hunger. The Emperor turns toward the forbidden forest before the teachers do, because predation is a shape one recognizes across all worlds. The tree line boils a little, shadow bleeding out as if gravity has grown roots. Dozens of cloaked figures glide from that dark, faces a negative space that eats breath and courage. Dementors. Students gasp. Wands rise, trembling. A Hufflepuff girl whispers a happy memory like a prayer she cannot remember the words to. The first Dementor breaks past the inner ward, and the candles in the great hall gutter as if ashamed. He strides forward. The first Dementor lunges and storm winds collapse around it, a gustless implosion-like sound taking a step backward. The Emperor opens the gate in his mind that is never safely open and bears a fragment of sunrise. Light arrives without permission. Not light like heat, light like verdict. The nearest 7 Dementors unravel into the concept of fog, their cloaks falling as if surprised to find no bones inside. The rest recoil, but have no face with which to show fear. Their glide stutters to a crawl that looks like guilt. 100 breaths return to 100 lungs, loud as applause. Some students cry without deciding to. Some laugh because the crying cannot decide who owns the mouth. The Emperor does not chase the retreating shapes. He lifts his right hand and sends a weave into the tree line that looks like a cathedral floor plan, rotating through 3 dimensions. Where it passes, empty cold becomes mere winter again. Dumbledore's wand clicks into his hand not because he intends to fight, but because habit arranges his fingers. He watches, eyes narrowing, measuring not the scale of power, obvious, but the cost. The Emperor tilts his head. The edge of his vision blooms with a migraine starburst. A small boy in slithering green drops to one knee and vomits quietly, overwhelmed by too much sky inside a skull. A warm hand grasps the boy's shoulder, Minerva's voice low, precise. In through the nose. Count 7. Good lad. She looks at the golden figure in the courtyard and thinks about children and fireworks and the difference between seeing a king and believe things. One. A dozen auras apparate on the far lawn with a series of cracks that feel like knuckles popping inside the air. The leader, a square-shouldered witch with a monocle and a habit of treating rules like suggestions, Amelia Bones, sweeps the field, jaw tightening at the sight of a stranger who makes the world bend around him like heat above a forge. She recognizes his act as protection and still measures him as a threat. Both can be true and often are. He turns to face her before her wand finishes its first syllable. "The tear," he says, pointing toward the sky where the seam still faintly glows. "This is bait. It drew your prison's hunters. It will draw worse. Worse than Dementors," an aura mutters before good sense closes his mouth. "Worse," the Emperor says, and for a fraction of a fraction, his voice contains a battlefield with 10 suns burning and not enough men to hold the line. The headmaster steps between auras and anomaly. A polite, stubborn door. "We will, of course, discuss jurisdiction," he says, and a picture of a ministry office full of forms flickers in his gaze. "After the children are safe." "Safe," Amelia echoes, and the word is a promise held between teeth. The Emperor closes his eyes. He lowers his head as if in prayer, but addresses the sky with the specific intimacy of a mechanic telling a machine to cooperate. He threads his mind into the lattice he drew earlier and sows. Mana here is not warp there, but belief is a currency both banks accept. He pays with the memories of worlds that never had schools at all. The castle feels the stitch. Ancient bricks exhale. A cracked gargoyle face resets its jaw with a satisfied grind. The seam fades 2 shades toward closed, but not closed. Something on the other side strokes it like a cat testing a door. He opens his eyes. "Your wards are good," he says to the headmaster, "and noble. They will not stand against what calls. I can help, but my presence pulls. If I build, I must bind more than stone." Dumbledore meets that with a calm that has won him wars and lost him friends. "What would you bind?" "Fear," the Emperor says simply, "and despair. They breed here because you let them graze at your walls, thinking control is ownership." Amelia's monocle flashes. "We do not keep Dementors at a school." "Not yet," he says, and somehow the sentence contains a diagram of a future she hasn't read. A hush like a library between thunderstorms floats over the courtyard. He moves again, and the movement is a plan. He walks the perimeter of the inner wards, mapping with each step the history of enchantments laid by hands that believed in teaching more than in winning. He admires the audacity of founding a fortress for adolescents. He respects it enough to not condescend. The forbidden forest pushes back. The Emperor slows as the tree line groans. A single Dementor, braver or hungrier, tests the new light and slithers into it like oil across water. He allows it so he can see what his light makes of such a thing. It comes close enough to feel warm, and then screams without a mouth as understanding finds it. Warmth is not for you. He lifts his blade from no scabbard, because his scabbard is the concept of being armed. The sword is a sun taught to be a line. He does not swing in heat, but in geometry, tracing an arc that returns the Dementor to a cloud and a handful of black ice that flashes out of existence before it hits the ground. Students cheer, then stop, ashamed of liking the death of something that looks like grief wearing a cloak. He hears the shame and files it under mercy. He has killed armies and still believes in teaching what not to like. The headmaster steps closer, voice pitched, so only the circle inside the circle hears. "You speak as though the world is a battlefield," he says mildly. "It is," the Emperor answers, without heat. "It is also a school. Then it is a crucible with desks." Minerva's mouth twitches despite herself. Amelia snorts once, surprised into liking him before she can stop it. Snape's eyes narrow further, measuring how much history hides in a sentence about desks. The sky seam sighs and tries to widen. The Emperor shunts power through his mind and feels a thread in himself snap with a sensation like a string breaking on a lute someone plays inside his skull. He does not touch his temple because he does not respect pain enough to give it attention, but he files the break under Kos. He cannot keep the Astronomican's echo this bright without fraying. Hogwarts breathes with him. Its stones offer thresholds, corridors, secret stairs, a centuries-old habit of hiding the young from the old. He leans his thoughts into those habits and reorients them to face an enemy that does not respect doorways. He folds a refectory into a ward hinge. He binds a first year's bravery into a latch. Children begin to be moved with quiet efficiency, shepherded by prefects suddenly promoted by circumstance into tacticians. Hufflepuffs hold the smallest hands without fuss. Ravenclaws count heads faster than magic. Slytherins map exit routes and contingency routes while pretending to be bored. Gryffindors want to stand and do stand until asked to be the wall. He honors all four by adjusting the flow of corridors around their strengths. A rumble approaches from the sky like a herd of metal insects. The auras glance up and for a heartbeat think of dragons. Dark shapes crest the clouds, then resolve into cloaks. More Dementors, but not clumsy. They fly in rank. Below them, black-robed figures on brooms keep a formation too neat for teenagers out for mischief. Death Eaters. Masks glint with a fashion that confuses theatre for terror. One sweep with practiced cruelty. One lifts a wand and draws a skull and serpent in the sky. The unfinished seam eats the green smoke with hunger, turning the dark mark into a sacrament it does not deserve to be. The Death Eater laughs, then stops laughing when the laugh keeps going as if the air is finishing the joke badly. The Emperor watches the mark dissolve with a kind of sadness because symbols are tools badly used. He steps forward, plants his sword in the ground. The blade drinks the column of winter and returns it as a pillar of ordered heat, light tuned to drive back specific hungers. A dome forms, not hard but stubborn, and the first wave of Dementors strikes it and simply cannot be where it is. Death Eaters angle down, weaving. Spells crack against the dome and spit out harmlessly like seeds hitting a drum. The Emperor adjusts the dome's harmonics without moving. His mind rides frequencies. The castle's old music answers. A bolt of sickly green lances from a dark mask and dies an honest death against his ward, the colour robbed of its story. Dumbledore lifts his wand at last, not to attack but to conduct. Shields on the turrets, he says to the air, and the air obeys because it has learned his voice, and the heads of gargoyles vomit translucent panes that lock over the crenellations with the prompt clack of soldiering. Amelia Bones barks. Auras snap to their positions, forming squads by the central lawn and the viaduct bridge, leaving corridors of fire breaks aligned to the assumed approach of broom riders. She measures distances in hexes and heartbeats. No lethal unless they force you, she says, then glares at the sky and mutters, "They'll force us." The Emperor's dome hums. He threads a tendril from it, thin as a violin string, and stretches it up and out until it touches the closest broom. The mask tilts, curious. The tendril twangs, and the broom's bristles fall out with exquisite order, leaving a man sitting on a stick, looking surprised by gravity. He falls into snow and dignity at the same speed. Snape's lip curls. He recognizes craft. He does not praise. "Why here?" Minerva asks, eyes on the Death Eaters, mind on the children. "Because here has meaning," the Emperor answers. "They serve a patron that eats meaning and spits envy. They seek to make your school afraid of its own glory." The Death Eaters adjust tactics, as bullies do when the first shove fails. They zig to the greenhouses, expecting soft cover. Sprigs of venomous tentacular lash, offended at being used as an alibi. The plants have long, petty memories and enjoy an opportunity to be on the right side for once. Madame Pumphrey shepherds 24 students into the infirmary and bars the door with a curse for fevers, repurposed as a ward for intruders. The castle notices, approves, incorporates. A masked figure lifts both hands and calls lightning. It answers, but crooked, attracted to the seam as iron to lodestone. The crackling bolt enters the tear and doesn't come back. A second masked figure takes a slower approach, whispers into the seam a phrase taught by a darker teacher. The seam glows pink-purple for an instant, a color that means cleverness without kindness. The Emperor frowns. That color is a dialect of a language he loathes. He steps to the viaduct. He lifts his left hand. The right remains sunk in the courtyard, blade singing geometry, and closes all his fingers except the ring. With that lone digit, he writes a rune in air that is not from this alphabet. The rune hovers, then slides into the seam like a needle at the end of a thread, and the seam cinches a fraction. The Death Eater, speaking cleverness, swallows a scream as his own voice bites his tongue. The Emperor pays for the rune with a thread of blood inside his ear. A salt runoff he wipes away not at all. He breathes steadily. He is not young, and youngness has never been the measure of endurance in any war that mattered. The forest replies with a groan that is also a laugh. Something older than dementors but younger than rocks wakes, roused by the taste of a new light. Acromantulas cluster under trunks the way soldiers cluster under banners. They do not yet emerge. They think in webs. Webs love new vibrations. He turns back to the headmaster. I can sever this place from the seam completely for an hour, he says. It will cost your wards a decade of patience. Or I can weave a hinge that holds but invites pressure. It will train your castle to fight. It will invite attack. Minerva looks to Dumbledore. Amelia looks to her auras. Dumbledore looks to the children. Train us, he says, and the word lands with the weight of a man who has already lost what he was trying to spare. The Emperor nods once, simply. He releases his sword from the earth and sets it sheathed again in the thought of being sheathed. He steps into the great hall with a stride that modifies thresholds. Children part. He stands before the staff table. Plates clear themselves, embarrassed to be about food when war is a guest. He touches the table, and the wood remembers forests with wolves and reorganizes itself into a desk for maps. Maps appear, drawn by quills that cannot help obeying someone who speaks the grammar of intention. Hogwarts spreads as a topographic of knowledge, towers in algebra, basements in recipes. Outside, the forest inscribes itself with old names. The lake imprints its depth. The sky prints its seam. Dumbledore sets his palm on the map just once, blessing or consent. Amelia steps beside him, monocle reflecting battle lines. Minerva stands on the other side, a straight line between children and harm. Snape positions himself slightly behind, a shadow at the edge of light. Because shadows have their duties. We have time for 5 orders, the Emperor says. Then they will adapt, and we will require 10. And after that, panic will offer additional suggestions. Evacuation, Minerva begins. Into where? Amelia asks, and the question contains 100 floors, 1,000 stairs, 3 secret passages, and 5 were-will-bes that haven't yet happened. Evacuation into preparedness, Dumbledore says, which is a poem and a tactic. Order 1, the Emperor says. All students into houses. Houses into tasks. He touches the map. 4 colors wake like remembered banners. His hand moves and corridors bend so that green, red, blue, and yellow do not cross to the wrong comforts. Prefects receive instructions without words, minds tickled by light, and sprint. Order 2, he says. Auras to the viaduct and the Slytherin water entrance. You will think like serpents and catch birds sideways. Amelia nods and starts assigning squads, voice crisp enough to cut leather. Names fly, assignments land, feet move. Order 3. Teachers to the towers. Your wands are artillery. Remember, suppress. Don't strike to kill unless there is no other mercy. Minerva does not nod. She already moves. Snape follows, gliding with the economy of someone who has the right to dislike everything about this, but will shoulder it anyway. Order 4. I will set a hinge. It will change your castle. It might change your magic. Consent. The headmaster's hand, already on the map, tightens. He glances down the table at portraits of past headmasters and a pair of empty frames whose occupants have gone missing on principle. Consent granted, he says, and the room acknowledges with a subtle shift, like a boat seat accepting a heavier passenger. Order 5, the Emperor says. Send word to your ministry that their prison's choice of wardens will go badly in days to come. They must change it, or I will. Threaten the ministry later, Amelia says dryly. We're busy. He inclines his head a fraction in respect. He enjoys someone who will tell him when to delay the pleasure of being right. He leaves the map and steps to the center of the great hall. He spreads his fingers as if telling the air to hush, and the air obeys. The candles above dip. The planetary chandeliers, the enchanted sky, goes to a measured twilight. He kneels and places both palms on stone. The hall waits, an animal poised. He sends his thought downward into foundations, sideways into wards, upward into the false sky and the real one beyond. He does not impose, he harmonizes. He tunes Hogwarts to a key that lets it sing against despair instead of merely insulating it. The floor trembles once, hardly more than a heartbeat. The banners of houses flex. The youngest child in the back row, who has cried quietly through the entire morning, stops crying because the world feels like a hand in their back now, holding them upright. The hinge lands. The seam in the sky hums. The castle hums back in a lower register, a cousin tone. The hinge will hold. It will also call attention like a beacon. Here is a place that answers its own fear. He stands. He staggers exactly one step, not because he is weak, but because honesty is a currency he would rather spend than hoard in front of children. Dumbledore sees that and hides nothing. He steps forward, takes the Emperor's forearm in a clasp that is not worship. Thank you, he says, and means it and all the years of it. Stand well, the Emperor says softly. Your staff will resent me later. Let them. It is loyalty trying to hide its fear. Amelia strides to the doors, calls her squads, and leaves on a draft of intention. Minerva is already a moving geometry problem. She vanishes into stairs that did not exist 2 breaths ago and appear for her now. Snape reaches the shadow of a pillar and hesitates, looks back once with a vertical crease between his eyes that is not skepticism, but care misfiled as dislike. He leaves without being seen to leave. The Emperor returns to the courtyard. Snow falls again, deciding the sky tear is not enough to cancel the season. He lifts his face to the small mercy and admires the ordinary. He hears a whisper that is not in the air. The thing on the far side of the seam testing his hinge as a tongue tests a chipped tooth. He lets it test. He wants it to think him safe to tease. Students move like schools of fish along corridors, their headmaster taught to bend toward survival. Peeves the poltergeist rattles chains in a manner that suggests he would smash skulls if skull smashing were allowed in his contract. And when told it is not, he instead throws ink at Death Eaters with the childish viciousness of a redeemed hooligan. On the lawn, the first Death Eater formation charges again. The dome emits a sigh, and their curses flatten without that ordinary magical whine that suggests air being cut. The Emperor lowers the dome for exactly the time it takes a volley of aura stunners to blaze outward, a dozen red lines stitching a neat seam across the enemy's advance, dropping brooms into snow and arrogance into embarrassment. He lifts the dome again before the second volley of green arrives. One masked figure does not fall. He adjusts mid-air with a calculation that ignores gravity and thanks intellect. He raises his wand again, and the angle of it is mathematics, not malice. The Emperor watches with pleasure as someone on the other side of this fight volunteers to be clever enough to merit respect. The figure sends a curse that hits the dome and does not splash or die. It burrows, not with power but with grammar, looking for a syntactic flaw. The Emperor grins without showing teeth. He adores a jewel in the alphabet. He counters by adding a clause, a little sub-sentence about direction that turns the burrowing curse sideways, and it exits the dome into the grass where it grows a square foot of mushrooms that argue about philosophy until a Hufflepuff picks them up and puts them in a safe box. Someone screams near the greenhouses. The Emperor turns, listens through stone, and finds a cluster of students improvising a barricade with wheelbarrows. A Death Eater breaks through, wand up, aim steady. The Emperor is too far to get there physically without giving up the hinge's harmonics. He considers the problem as he has considered a million others. Accept a small loss to prevent a great one, or purchase a small miracle on credit. He will pay with his own marrow. He buys the miracle. His thought compresses. The courtyard's snow lifts, becomes a sheet, becomes an edge, and sails across the lawn like a thrown coin. It hits the Death Eater's wrist, not hard enough to break bone, but rude enough to knock the wand sideways into the mouth of a potting jar that bites and refuses to let go. Having been charmed by a bored herbology student to eat only magic, the Death Eater protest falls into a bed of pufferpods that burst into flowers with an enthusiasm that offends dignity. He pays for the trick with a second string breaking left of his eye. His vision blurs for 3 breaths. He resets his own mind with a single word, not in English and not safe for any room that is not a cathedral. Dumbledore watches, learns without being taught, admires without surrendering. "Can you stay?" he asks quietly, when they stand halfway between map and dome, prisoners of a 10-second respite. "I can," the Emperor says. "I should not, but I will, until the hinge learns to sing without me." He lifts his gaze to the seam, and until the thing on the other side loses interest in this toy. "It will not lose interest," Dumbledore says. "No," the Emperor agrees, "but it will learn respect." 2 Dementors attempt to flank low, hugging the ground like mistakes. The Emperor allows them to come within a yard and then breathes out. Frost forms and then recedes from grass in a smooth ripple, the opposite of their hunger. A generous exhale that denies them a purchase. They stall like boats without water. An aura with a steady hand tags them with Patronus light, and they vaporize into grammar errors corrected. A hush spreads through the castle, strange and unasked for. Every portrait leans toward a horizontal frame above the staff table that has recently been empty. A white-bearded man in severe robe steps into it, face calm, eyes a storm that pretends it is following rules. Phineas Nigellus Black returns to say something cutting. He sees the golden figure in the courtyard and says nothing cutting. He bows briefly, like an aristocrat to a king he hadn't planned to acknowledge. "Albus," Phineas says instead, tone almost polite. "The Ministry's owls have decided to decide. Dolores Umbridge is drafting a decree." "Of course she is," Amelia says from the doorway, not bothering to hide her contempt. "Draft this instead. The school is under attack by Death Eaters and Dementors, and a guardian has returned them to their appropriate distance. We are defending the children. Tell them to send anyone useful and to leave their inkpots at home." Phineas sniffs. "I will convey the message," he says, and vanishes as if the air ate him. The Emperor feels the castle bridle at the rumour of a decree like a war horse smelling a whip. He smooths it with a thought. "Not yet. Save your rage for enemies that prefer pain to paperwork." The scene brightens a shade. The forest answers. Something inside the trees laughs with mandibles. The first acromantulas begin to test the snow, long legs measuring chill, eyes glittering with a black humour that enjoys seeing tall things kneel. Children scream because spiders are worse than philosophy. Hagrid roars, half grief, half joy, at seeing old students, even if they want to eat him. The Emperor considers spiders. The warp likes a shape that has too much leg. He can respect a predator that hunts by hunger instead of ideology. He does not hate them. He will still ask them to leave. He steps to the edge of the dome and speaks in a language of footfalls and web tension, borrowed from a campaign on a world whose sun never touched its forest floor. The acromantulas stop. Their bodies hum with curiosity. He lifts a hand. He draws a circle in air the size of a man and sets it on the ground like a portal that is not a portal, a suggestion that the forest is deeper elsewhere. The spiders consider and decide. A deeper elsewhere sounds like a place with more food. They go, one by one, up and into a round idea, vanishing into a place he made for them that sends them 3 ridges away and a day's walk into the mountains. Hagrid watches with amazement, relief, and a small sorrow. "You talk to him," he says, half admiration, half accusation. "I show them the way out of a bad decision," the Emperor replies gently. The hinge holds. The seam throbs. The Death Eaters retreat to a line beyond the lake to regroup and remember how planning works. The auras hold position. Amelia sets her jaw toward the future. Dumbledore leans on a rail and re-evaluates a century of theory about power and pedagogy. Minerva closes her hands around the railing hard enough to ache and allows herself a smile, because the children are still alive and have not learned the wrong lesson from it. Somewhere in London, the ministry drafts a decree, finds the ink clots, and redrafts it smaller. Somewhere beyond a sky that thinks itself a ceiling, a thing of colours that should not exist, tests a stitch made by a man who has wrestled gods until they consented to bleed. The Emperor feels his own limits like a bell heard from below ground. The Astronomicons echo through him strains. He will have to anchor it differently or dim it. Dimming it will reduce the lure. Dimming it will also reduce his certainty that he can banish what comes next. He will choose in a minute. A minute feels like a treaty. He stands in the snow and watches a child in a yellow scarf kneel to tie a red scarf child's bootlace. He watches a green scarf child move to intercept a stray curse with a shield. He learned from a book 2 years ahead. He watches a blue scarf child calculate the curvature of the dome and decide where it is thinnest, and then move to stand there because that is where she will be most useful. His heart, which is not a metaphor and not merely a muscle, tightens with recognition. This is why. This is always why. A voice arrives at his shoulder like a short sword. "You stand like a king," Severus Snape says, not admiringly. Kings wreck classrooms. The Emperor turns his head a fraction. "Classrooms make kings unnecessary," he answers, "if someone stays long enough to teach well." "Do you intend to stay?" Snape asks, deliberately not looking at the seam, because he does not flinch before storm gods when he can help it. "Until the hinge holds without me," the Emperor replies, "or until your enemies learn something worse than fear." Snape snorts, a sound like someone writing sarcasm with a quill, but choosing not to read it aloud. They always do. He walks away, cloak snapping, ready to set cauldrons boiling and corridors trapping and children not dying on his watch. The Emperor watches him go and respects the austerity that calls itself spite to make duty easier to carry. Across the snow, the first dead person today is a Death Eater who thought flying low made him braver. He lies with his mask off, face ordinary, older than a student, but not old enough to be wise. The Emperor looks at him and does not rejoice. He files the corpse under price and keeps the receipt. He turns to the seam and stops admiring snow. He closes his eyes and dims the Astronomicon inside him 3 degrees. The lure softens. The light in the dome steadies, but goes a hair less warm. 2 students shiver who had not before. He remembers their faces, because memory is a penance he prefers to take willingly. His mind stretches toward the ministry, not because he respects bureaucracies, but because information kills fewer children than ignorance. He touches Amelia's monocle with a thought to borrow the line. She startles, then grins, then says into the lens, "He can talk through my glass. Don't break it." A slate-faced man in a panelled office appears as if standing behind glass in a storm. "Madam Bones. School under attack. Outside aid present. Send what we ask for, not what you think we need. And call off your Dementors from Azkaban before they decide the tear is their new cafeteria." The man blinks like an amphibian told to grow wings. "That is a policy decision." "It is a decision, yes," Amelia says. "Policy is what you call decisions you make with your eyes closed." The Emperor threads his voice through the glass like a low note. "Your wardens eat the souls of your prisoners. That debt compounds into your children. Stop it." The man swallows. He looks around his office as if there might be a clause on a shelf that excuses responsibility. He fails to find one and says he will take it under advisement. Amelia breaks the connection and mutters exactly 3 words that make a portrait gasp and a gargoyle smile. Hogwarts flexes again. The hinge settles. The children move into tasks that are age-appropriate for a siege. The scene waits. The forest watches. The lake keeps its secrets because it enjoys being dramatic. The Emperor lifts his face to the sky and smells the next arrival. Not Death Eaters, not Dementors, something smarter, more precise, willing to poke where pride will make him vulnerable. He feels his own pride uncurl like an animal and tells it to go eat somewhere else. He squares his shoulders and readies his mind for rhetoric as much as for war, because in softer worlds the line between the two is a luxury and a weapon. The day moves forward, concrete beat by concrete beat, until the snow has recorded the footprints of 100 small braveries, and the golden figure at the center of the courtyard has learned enough of this castle's song to sing harmony without lead. Snow tightens into crust as bootprints cross and recross the courtyard. The seam dims under a sky that remembers how to be grey. The golden figure lowers his dome in one quadrant, opens a lane, and invites the enemy to choose a mistake. They take it. Black masks skim low over the lake, playing the angle to avoid aura sightlines. He turns the moving staircases in the castle into wind. Stone rearranges above their heads. The gust that follows is not weather, but architecture, exhaling. Brooms yaw, skids widen. A rank drifts offline by 2 yards. Portraits wake the same way drums wake a camp. A 17th century witch in a frame above the boathouse stops her knitting and hurls the yarn. The thread, enchanted twice, then forgotten, nets 2 riders. They fall, alive, angry, and unhurt enough to learn. The Emperor's hand sketches an ellipse in air. It slides over the lake like a lens and magnifies a patch of calm into a platform. The fallen land there, sputter, and abound with bands that look like light but feel like old oak. On the eastern bank, a trio of Death Eaters sprint, keeping to dips, aiming for the slithering water entrance, like snakes remembering a burrow. He lets them reach the door. An aura squad, Bones's cadence in their steps, springs the second after the door believes their passwords, stunners instead of green, ropes instead of blood. One masked one flicks to the killing curse and cannot find the syllable. The word dies in his throat like a guilty thought. The Emperor's dome, phase shifted to grammar, not force, has taught killing names not to land. He moves without moving more than a yard. The dome hums and becomes 3 planes, stacked. Incoming curses hit the first and flatten into wrung-off sparks. Dementor cold hits the second and heats into thin mist. The third remains untouched, a reserve. He holds harm in layers, buys time for better choices. Near Greenhouse 3, glass pops at the corner, an angle too cold for the frame's patience. He flicks 2 fingers. The panes flex, change angle, release pressure slowly like someone letting out a held breath. Inside, Professor Sprout salutes with a muddy glove and returns to work with pufferpods and revoltingly useful plants. Creatures test the edge of his light. He lets Hagrid stand in the gap, crossbow down, voice large and kind in spider tongue and other names for hunger. He allows a small herd of centaurs to watch from the tree line, arrows notched, pride intact. He does not tell allies how to be themselves. A fan of green cracks from the far side of the lake. 5 killing curses at staggered intervals, a textbook attempt to force a shield to choose. He presents them with a different exam. He threads his dome with a braid of integers and lets the first 4 enter on one frequency, the 5th on another. They collide, cancel, leave a harmless spray of light like fireworks, embarrassed to be lethal. The Death Eaters falter. A captain barks them back into shape, but the air insists on honesty. Their breaths show fear as gusts in the snow. The Emperor lowers the dome briefly, enough for Amelia's squads to send a tight volley. Witches and wizards drop to snow, none die. Those that try to die miserably by their own curses find their syllables betray them. His third plane refuses to carry that particular music today. The first wave breaks. The second thinks better of it and retreats to the far bank to write excuses about why cruelty failed in cold weather. The Dementors drift higher, uncertain, famished, discovering that hunger is not a right. He neither pursues nor jeers. Victory is a tool, not a poster. He returns to the map, because war always returns to a map. The Great Hall rearranges again, benches a standing formation, plates a perimeter for parchment. Teachers and auras step into a geometry already prepared for their bodies. Dumbledore arrives last, not because his stride is slower, but because he wastes a second patting a first year on the shoulder. And that is the second that makes a man trustworthy. First engagement contained, Amelia reports. Snow glitters on her cloak like an honest decoration. 24 arrests, no civilian dead. 7 minor injuries, all ours, all fixable. Casualties, 1 dead among the masked. Minerva adds, tone neither triumph nor apology. He fell when his broom failed. No curse touched him. Madame Pomfrey has the students. The worst a broken wrist. The Emperor listens without comment. He feels the hinge humming, now a note he can hear without shouting. Hogwarts has learned something in an hour. It has been waiting a century to know. Praise arrives in sideways sentences. Your method spared lives, Amelia says, which is an award coming from a woman who hates giving them. Thank you. It was a clean fight, Minerva says, and understands there is no such thing, but gives him the compliment anyway. You waited the corridors to keep the children from becoming what they are not. Dumbledore watches him with the kindness of a blade put away, but kept sharp. Your light, he says, almost admiring. It did not kill when killing was the simple path. The simple path is often a very long one, the Emperor says. He reaches to the map and touches the lakeshore. The black ink of trees accepts a fan of triangles, fields of fire, retreated vectors, lines of retreat that are not cowardice, but humility. Snape stands with arms folded, his posture a thesis on suspicion. This school is not a fortress, he says. The word slow enough to be respectful and hard enough to be not. It is now, Amelia answers before the Emperor can, dry as flint. And better it be a fortress that teaches than a classroom that pretends siege is not a subject. Debate enters like weather, inevitable, not personal. Dumbledore rests his palms on the table, eyes on the map, voice for the room, not for himself. We keep talking about holding lines. Good, we hold lines, but we must also hold children, firmly enough to keep them from falling, lightly enough not to bruise. A guardian with this much light will be mistaken for a sun. Suns have gravity. Schools need windows. The Emperor inclines his head, as if given an honest wound to test. Freedom is what I fight for, he says. Breathing, thinking, laughing freedom. Doctrine is what I use so that freedom survives its enemies. Discipline is not a cage. It is a bridge built in fire so others can cross to morning. Dumbledore meets that with the steel behind candy. And yet, he says, you know bridges become toll roads if the builders never leave. He nods once. I have stayed too long in every war. I learned slowly and at high cost. I will not annex your school. Snape snored softly. Mercy with an affidavit, he murmurs. Minerva's eyes quell him without looking. Amelia taps the map with a short nail. The Ministry will react badly to an annex they did not authorize, she says. Even if it has not occurred. The Ministry will react badly to air if they did not approve its composition, Snape mutters. Amelia does not disagree aloud. The Emperor lifts his gaze. I did not come to rule you, he says, making the sentence as simple as a window. I came because a door opened where there should be a wall. My light binds it. But my light calls predators that like to hate light. This is a cost I impose by existing. So, I make plans to shrink me as a target and grow you as defenders. Teach us how to sing, Dumbledore says, understated, approving the hinge. Let us choose our solos, Minerva adds, which is her way of saying autonomy and meaning it. He reaches for the quills. They move before his hand arrives. The map blossoms with rehearsals. How specific drills spooling from corridors. Ghosts assigned as scouts because dead should be used to saving the living from the mistakes the dead made. The kitchens pivot to a logistics node. The elves, already in motion, accept supply chains like receiving a prank. He speaks to the room. I require oath bearers, he says. Not to me, to this place. The hinge needs hands that do not tire when I leave. I will bind them to the school song. Volunteers will come forward. They will carry weight that ages them. I ask with full knowledge of what asking costs. Hagrid opens his mouth, closes it. His hand rises as if in class. I'll swear, he says, and the word lands heavy like soil in a good garden. He kneels on one knee, a mountain too polite to loom. Madame Pomfrey, lips thinner than a razor, steps forward. Make it short, she says. I have patience. This is consent. Flitwick bows with the memory of jewels in his spine. Professor Sprout simply nods and looks delighted by the idea of roots having a new binding. Professor Vector appears, ink still on her fingers, and says she wants to test the numbers and the duty both. A half-dozen prefects step up unsteady but standing, as if daring their legs to be brave. He does not cut their palms or draw blood with spectacle. Spectacle teaches the wrong lesson. He writes the oath into the air as light that looks like a treble clef falling asleep. To hold a hinge against despair, he says, is to choose a weight you will carry when no one thanks you. Do you consent to be unthanked and steady? Yes, they say. and you can hear in the plural 7 different inflections: joy, stubbornness, defiance, duty, curiosity, affection, and a simple yes that has no decoration at all. He binds their yes to the flagstones. It slides into mortar, rises into banners, stays in their bones. Their eyes do not glow, their shadows do not lengthen. They simply stand straighter, which is enough. Doctrine has a point, Snape says into the pause, and his voice does not fight the words. You cannot keep them all safe without rules. Rules will break hearts. Broken hearts make recruits for our enemies. Mercy has a point, the Emperor replies, equally slow. You cannot keep them pure by hiding them from the weather. Weather kills, yes. It also teaches farmers when to plant. Dumbledore sets his palms back on the wood. His fingers are not steady. We agree on ends, he says. Lives saved, souls not warped. His eyes flick to Snape, a history contained in the motion. We disagree, sometimes violently, on means. Then sharpen the argument, Amelia says, impatient. Steal it and see if it survives its own edge. Dumbledore inhales. His words lock into a cadence that fits in a classroom and a battlefield both. Mercy, he says, and means it. Mercy assumes that people are worth saving, even when they give us reason to doubt it. Mercy designs prisons that do not eat the souls of the imprisoned, and schools that prepare the forgiven for a life, not just a sentence. Mercy refuses necessary, harms because the necessary is the word a coward uses when he does not want to imagine alternatives. Mercy is how a world looks in peacetime that deserves to survive war. He pauses. He is not done. Survival, the Emperor says, as if taking a relay baton, and means it like iron. Survival assumes that someone is trying to break you and will keep trying until they are stopped. Survival designs walls that hold and weapons that end threats when they need ending. Survival refuses to pretend bad men will become good because you call them names from a safe place. Survival is how a world looks when it remembers it has more children than it has poets. They stand a second in the silence created by 2 truths that do not hate each other, but do not live easily together. Snape glances between them and gives the faintest nod, as if grading a debate paper and finding it annoyingly competent. What do you do? Minerva asks quietly into the stillness. When mercy and survival want the same seat, you switch between them faster than your enemies can track, the Emperor answers, and you do not let either wear you. A boy in blue hesitates near the door. He has a message. He cannot enter the room of decisions without being changed by it, and he knows it. He comes anyway. Madam Bones, he says, there are men in grey in the courtyard. They do not knock. They are polite. Unspeakables, Snape says, eyebrows crouching. The Ministry's intelligence arm. When they are polite, something cruel is coming, but they want you to feel complicit. Amelia's jaw works. I did not invite them. She looks at the Emperor. I will handle them. We will, Dumbledore corrects gently. The courtyard has become a place for meetings you do not want to have. Snow has turned to a chalk of footprints. The seamless dome hums at a pitch you only hear if you have fought under them before. The men in grey robes stand in a loose semicircle. Their masks are not theatrical. They are work. Blank porcelain with a line for a mouth. Their leader wears no mask and does not need one. He is polite in the way water is to a stone. Persistent, shaping whether he means to or not. Director Vellum, Amelia says, placing the title like a curse. Madam Bones. He inclines his head, every movement precise, the courtesy of someone who always anticipates the next sentence. Headmaster Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, Professor Snape. His gaze skips to the golden figure and does not pretend it can categorize him. Guardian. Director, Dumbledore says. His smile contains 11 degrees of welcome, and none of them are sincere. "We apologize for the intrusion," Vellum says, and you can hear the lie wagging its tail. "We have brought a containment array. Your school has become a point of interest for forces beyond our charts. We propose to stabilize the site." He gestures. Two unspeakables unfold something that refuses to decide what shape it wants. A shroud that looks like fog taught to obey. It vibrates at the edge of sound. When it touches the dome's light, the light folds away, not in fear, but from disgust, the way a hand retracts from rot. Amelia's face goes more stony. "What is it?" "A veiling mantle," Vellum says mildly, "derived from the death chamber's phenomena. It softens edges. It makes what is sharp become quiet. We have tuned it to dampen. Over bright signal." Dumbledore feels the hall's candles gutter. He glances up. The enchanted ceiling shows clouds, but the clouds seem to not believe in themselves. He feels for the first time the hinge recoil, not from an attack, from a negation. The Emperor steps forward, a minimal shift with maximized consequences. The shroud advances an inch, tasting his light. He does not lift his sword. He does not raise his hand. He lowers his head exactly a degree, and his voice is so gentle that snow remembers spring for a heartbeat. "Take that away." Vellum smiles without showing teeth. "We will, once we have mapped your emission and trained our array to coexist. We are responsible for the stability of the British magical ecosystem." "The veil is not a tool," Dumbledore says, soft, which is how he speaks when alarmed. "It is a wound through which we make choices larger than we are." Vellum inclines his head, as if at a helpful sermon. "We have learned very much from the wound, Headmaster." He looks back to the golden figure. "Your light calls. We will hush it. You will thank us when the wolves stop coming." The Emperor studies the mantle. The men holding it strain invisibly. It is heavy to minds, not hands. The air's grammar goes greasy around its edges. He feels the Astronomican's echo in him falter like a cathedral singer being asked to sing into a sack. He does not shout. He tests. He sends a thread of his light into the mantle and listens to the physics it answers with. The thread goes thin, goes cold, does not return. His migraine star tightens. The hinge hum slides a half step down and fails to harmonize with the castle for 1 second. In the infirmary, a child cries out in sleep. He sees how this hurts him, not by hitting, but by unwriting. The mantle speaks a language of ungrammar that makes nouns ashamed to declare themselves. His light is belief weaponized into physics. The mantle is doubt crystallized into fabric. He can endure pain. He cannot allow a lesson that teaches children that good words are embarrassing to stand. "Stop," Amelia says crisp. "Withdraw your cloth from my crime scene." "Your crime scene?" Vellum asks, amused. "Or the nation's?" "Children live here," Minerva says, and the word children cracks like ice when a river starts moving. The unspeakables glance at each other, as if ticked by a nerve. Vellum's face does not move. The Emperor steps closer. The mantle's edge inches toward him as if eager, either to eat or to be converted. He opens his left hand, palm out, and writes the shortest rune he knows, the one that means no. It is not force, not heat, not anger. It is boundary. The mantle halts, astonished. A predator told that the meat has a moral it must read before biting. Vellum's eyes flicker just once, the smallest interest. "Fascinating," he says. "We have never seen a non-local refusal field deployed without a wand." Snape's attention needles into that phrase. "Non-local refusal field," he repeats, tasting the theory. He files it away on a shelf labeled "useful in the worst way." Power scaling. Interlude. 1. The mantle is a null grammar spun from Death's chamber. Not hostile energy, but conceptual subtraction. It erases verbs, then nouns, then memory in that order, if allowed to pool. Psychers and saints burn brighter, but fall harder under it. Their radiance gives it more to eat. Patronus magic, being declarative joy, stutters. Oath bonds, thin like rope under acid. Maps lose contour lines first, then coastlines, then names. It does not fight light. It teaches light to doubt what light is for. He learns this in 3 heartbeats. He knows he cannot cut it with the sword without teaching it familiarity. He chooses creativity. He reaches into the castle and requests 2 things. The golden thread of hospitality still humming under Dumbledore's palm on the map table, and the memory of a child's first step on a staircase that moved under them and did not drop them. He twines those into a ribbon and offers it to the mantle not as fuel, but as manners. The mantle falters. It has learned to eat fear and heroics. It has not learned to digest courtesy. It hesitates because it recognizes an old law, guest right. The castle, freshly tuned, extends that right for exactly 3 inches of cloth. No farther. Back, the Emperor says. Not loud. The mantle retreats a thumb's width. Amelia sees the slim give and advances 2 paces, flanked by auras who do not raise wands because this is still politics. Director, you will not drape funeral silence over a school. Madam Bones, the ministry will defend itself in court if it survives, she says, which is the nicest threat she has offered all day. Dumbledore softens nothing. Vellum, he says, and the name becomes a rebuke for the ages. The last time you brought Death's Breath into a classroom, you called it a field trip. I call it research, Vellum murmurs. And for once the mask slips, and you see the priest under the scientist and the fear under the priest. The mantle flexes, stubborn, testing the ribbon of courtesy. It finds an edge and tries to slide around it. The Emperor smiles with very little warmth. He asks Peeves for mischief. The poltergeist hangs upside down from a chandelier, grin wider than policy. Oh ho, Peeves sings, delighted. The big shiny wants a little rudeness. Harmless rudeness, the Emperor says. Peeves salutes as if promoted to Lieutenant Corporal of Prank. He vanishes and returns dragging a cluster of Weasley-branded inventions, extendable ears, fanged frisbees, portable swamps. In a sack he could not possibly be carrying given the geometry involved. He flings a fishtailing frisbee at the mantle. The cloth parries it lazily and discovers too late that it has bitten satire. The frisbee's enchantment converts serious silence into a squeal. The mantle hiccups. The portable swamp goes off at the edge of the grey circle, not flooding the courtyard, but changing the notion of ground just enough that the mantle's alignment slips. It sags and spills a yard sideways. Trickery, Vellum says, irritated. Tactics, Amelia replies. I will not fight you, Vellum says to the Emperor, voice still calm. But I will study you, and when we find the frequency, we will fix this place. Fix, Dumbledore repeats, baffled and enraged by the clinical cruelty of the word. As one fixes a broken toy? As one fixes a ruptured artery, Vellum says flatly. Headmaster, we are not your enemy. Neither are we your student. The Emperor intervenes because the room is a tinderbox, and the mantle is a match that discovers itself mid-fall. Director Vellum, he says, and takes 3 more careful steps, the mantle shrinking each time like an animal told to sit. You play with a veil that does not love you. You teach it to unname things, and it obliges, because unnaming is easy. When something hungry comes through that loves unnaming more than you do, your tools will fail you. We prepare, Vellum says. He gestures. 2 unspeakables unfold a cage made of rings that rotate around nothing. We build anti-structures. This is a quietus array. It will silence your hinge long enough for us to learn its song. The array lives. It sings a terrible almost music, the tone of midnight in a hospital. The hinge flinches. In the Ravenclaw Tower, a dozen quills stop of their own accord. In the Hufflepuff common room, a kettle forgets to boil. He could smash it. He does not. He has promised both mercy and survival their turn. He chooses a counter that risks fewer dead. He rewrites the courtyard's geometry. The Quietus array expects level ground. He curves the flagstones by a fraction of a degree around it. The rings tilt, their harmonics misaligned by the tiniest inconvenience. The note wobbles, collapses, resolves into nothing. The unspeakable holding the framework sways and sits down hard, not harmed, simply embarrassed by physics. Peeves applauds, upside down. Minerva's praise is a smile that almost escapes. She strangulates it successfully. Vellum absorbs this with the tidy grace of a man who makes updated notes without ego. Live data is precious, he says. We will return. Return with permission, Amelia says. Return with better respect, Dumbledore adds. Vellum's eyes rest on the Emperor. His curiosity is honest, his ethics contorted by a life spent near doors in the world that opened to terrifying rooms. Return with questions, he corrects, and answers, if you permit. I will meet you in your death chamber, the Emperor says, and the sentence lands like a stone dropping into still water. Future waves guaranteed. Not today, after your wolves have stopped sniffing. He means Death Eaters. He also means something else. Vellum nods once, measuring that promise against a calendar only he has seen. He signals. The mantle folds itself with the misery of a predator denied meat. The grey robes depart without back-turning. Courtesy has been taught how to be armour today. The mantle's taste lingers in the air like a plaque on teeth. The hinge trembles and then steadies. The Emperor checks internal lines. One thread of the Astronomican's call through him has frayed past safe. He lowers the signal again 2 degrees. The seam dims, the castle breathes easier. He bleeds a little from the nose and ignores it, until a small hand offers a handkerchief with Gryffindor lion embroidery. He takes it. He keeps it. Clever, Snape says in a tone that makes the word a challenge. But you cannot win with jokes and curves when an enemy brings doctrine instead of devices. Doctrine is a device, the Emperor says mildly. Better made, harder to break, more dangerous to its owner. Amelia leans on the map table as if it is a bar and she has earned a drink. They will go to the minister, she says, and to Umbridge. They will produce a parchment that tells us to stop being attacked. They will produce a parchment telling us to expel our guardian, Snape adds, almost cheerful, because being right when outcomes are bad is a profession. Dumbledore pivots to the business of staying alive without becoming his enemies. Then we are busy, he says. We will teach, we will drill, and perhaps we will invite our visitor to offer one lesson he cannot leave without lending. The Emperor turns to him, a king who has sat in too many war councils, recognizing a fellow addict of duty. Ask, he says. Hope, Dumbledore answers. Show them how to hold it without breaking it when a Dementor breathes. Show them how not to hate their enemy so much that they become mirror and not window. His glance to Snape is not accidental. He nods. This I can do. He does not conjure light. He asks it. In the Great Hall, he stands before children whose hands still smell of ink and fear. Patronus, he says, and the syllables taste like bread. You have been taught to recall a happy memory and speak a charm. Good. We will keep that. But there is another road, narrow and cold. It is called consent. You ask light to stand with you because others need it, not because you love it. He shows them, not by dazzle, but by posture. He breathes in, chooses a small mercy he witnessed an hour ago. the yellow scarf child tying a red scarf child's bootlace, and holds it in his chest without squeezing until it pops. "Consent to the task," he says softly, "not to your own joy." Light comes, bright and quiet. A stag that remembers frost and a dozen other shapes that prefer not to be named. They are not fireworks. They are witnesses. Children lift wands and whisper. The two methods meet in the middle and hug. Patronuses proliferate in a controlled delirium. The hall's chill retreats to the comfort of winter without malice. He watches the ones who cannot conjure yet. He kneels so his face is not a sky. "You do not have to succeed to be brave," he tells a boy whose wand drops twice. "You have to consent to keep trying. That is enough today." Minerva's mouth softens dangerously. Snape looks away and pretends not to remember a corridor and a green flash. Amelia, at the back, allows herself one blink longer than protocol, so her eyes stop stinging. He leaves the lesson to Dumbledore to polish. He returns to the hinge and listens to angles. A ripple. It is not the mantle. It is not Death Eaters. It is different. He looks toward the forbidden forest and sees fog rise a foot from the ground in a line that moves as if a giant is pulling a sheet over graves. The alarm goes in bones, not bells. The auras hit positions. Teachers take towers. The dome hums a hair higher. The lake goes still as a mirror held up to a lie. They come from under roots, not spiders, not wolves, humans, thin, grey, eyes like coins left soaking in vinegar. Chains trail from shoulders to no anchors. Prisoners without a prison. Azkaban ghosts without the dignity of death. Dementors have shaken off meat as a hobby. This is their hobby's harvest. They are not supposed to leave the island, Amelia says, and hears, disgusted, the bureaucrat in her. They were invited, the Emperor answers, watching the fog's velocity, by a seam and by the habit of hunger. Dumbledore lifts his wand and writes a wide arc of silver that lands like a net. It catches one of the shambling figures. The thing shrieks in two notes, one human and one not. It disintegrates into ash that blows into the lake and sinks, wanting to stop being. "Control collateral," Minerva says under her breath, reminding herself hard. The Emperor lifts his hand. He does not draw light. He draws boundaries. He writes 4 circles in air around the shamblers, zones where consent is required to enter. The shamblers, addicted to trespass, cannot pass a threshold that demands manners. They mill, confused, like dogs who have never seen a closed door and now face 4. Auras target with precision, stunners, binders, some using shield spells like hammers. Peeves drops a bucket on a head because some habits are true goodness, even when stupid. Snape deploys a triad of cutting hexes designed to nick ankles, not sever tendons. The shamblers trip and fall in piles, their momentum their enemy. One shambler approaches a pair of students backing toward the greenhouses. The boy with the scarf and his friend whose hair explodes in stress stand, wands shaking. The Emperor cannot bridge the space without giving the seam a free hand. He chooses words. "Consent," he calls, clear. And the boy hears and understands, for once not needing a Latin syllable. He lifts his wand and speaks, expecto patronum. But under the word is the choice. Not because he is happy, because she needs him to be brave. A stag explodes from his wand, angry and honest. It tramples the shambler into ash. He watches the boy with a complicated pride that hurts to chew. He files the face, the scar, the gait. He feels the seam watching that face, as if memorizing a future. The shamblers begin to fail. The dome doesn't kill them. It makes the ground dishonest under their dragging feet. They tumble, dissolve, are dispelled by silver animals that refuse to be Ethermese. The Emperor exhales into the hinge. It holds. He pushes a little, teaches it to push back, and learns that while it is learning, it can bruise him. The migraine starburst becomes a constellation. He stays on his feet because kings must never enjoy falling in front of children. The engagement ends. Snow takes back the courtyard. The seam sulks. The forest breathes an old breath that remembers being left alone. The Aurors count, report. No children dead. One Auror frostbitten from overextending his Patronus. Madame Pumphrey clucks, gives him a potion that tastes like unsweetened resolve. He returns to the map. Vellum's absent sits in a chair as if a guest still eating. They will return with a better quiet, he says, and the room hears the prediction as a duty, not fear. They will also bring someone clever enough to turn my oathbind into leash. Who? Minerva asks. An enemy who offers efficiency as kindness, he says, and a mirror that promises to save us time. Amelia rubs her eyes. They have a name for her, she says, tone resigned. Dolores Umbridge. Not her, Dumbledore says. She is bureaucracy with a throat. Dangerous, yes, not the blade. He looks grim. The unspeakables will send an operator. They rarely leave their depths. When they do, something is already being decided. Vellum's shadow stretches from London. The Ministry Owl arrives late with a decree. It calls for decorum and the removal of unlicensed guardians who alter ward architecture. It orders Dumbledore to submit the school to inspection and forbids Auror deployment without a pink signature. Amelia tears across the parchment with one nail and does not change expression. This never reached me, she says. We will continue as before. Dumbledore points to the last line. They've invoked the Death Chamber's jurisdiction, he says. They want to bind this seam as a phenomenon of their hall. Let them try, Minerva says through teeth. They will, the Emperor says, soft. He turns to Dumbledore. I will go to their hall. Not yet. After 3 days of drilling. After you have slept twice. I will not leave you today. But I will go. If their veil judges, better I stand before it than you. Dumbledore meets that with a blue fire steadiness. We will go, he says, which is his way of saying, we will not permit you to go alone to a place where names are a ransom. He accepts the correction. He re-evaluates the plan. He tunes the hinge 3 hairs closer to the castle's own song, so that if he is pulled away, it will not collapse like a tent when the pole is stolen. Night approaches. He refuses to call it that. He calls it a training opportunity with stars. They train. Gryffindors learn to be anchors. Hufflepuffs learn logistics as if feeding is a weapon, because it is. Ravenclaws test the dome's harmonics with song and math. Slytherins draft contingencies as if making mischief, because the line between cunning and survival is a rope to be walked. He stands with Snape by a window that looks at the seam and the sky reflected in the lake like a pupil. You dislike me, he says, stating, not accusing. I dislike the effect you have, Snape answers. On children, on idiots, on men who are not my students but think themselves teachers because they have a sword. I carry a sword because I have tried to go without and failed. You carry a sword because you have defined yourself as necessary, Snape says. And for a second, his voice cracks with a theory he hoped never to need again. And necessary people never leave once they are thanked. I've known one too many necessary men. He considers that, and does not defend himself. If I are thanked, he says, deliberately ungrammatical, making a joke only an old soldier would make. Hayek to himself, I will leave anyway. Snape snorts. It is not agreement, but it is not contempt. The seam pulses once more before midnight. He dims himself another degree, choosing to be bait less. The light in the dome remains, cooler now. Children yawn and are ordered to sleep by a matron who has never lost a patient by letting them fight fatigue. The next morning begins with frost that will not decide whether to melt. The hinge hums at a respectable middle C. The great hall serves porridge like ammunition. The owl post arrives in drifts. One letter carries a simple message, a black seal with the ministry's insignia and a line in severe script. The Department of Mysteries requests a controlled observation at your earliest safety. Amelia reads it and laughs once, a bark. Earliest safety, she says, as if they have ever waited for one. He glances at the seal and tastes the ink. There is a frequency in it he does not like. The veil's breath rides through bureaucracy now, a mimetic hex disguised as a letterhead. He cannot burn parchment as policy without changing too much of this world. He chooses to pin the letter under a paperweight shaped like a lion and let its whispering slow like cold honey until it gives up on indoctrinating a desk. They drill, they meet, they argue about whether a school can be a garrison without being a barracks. He demonstrates that a dormitory can become a triage station in 4 breaths and back again in 3. Minerva demonstrates that a class can be taught in a corridor while the corridor slides and the lesson still sticks. He spends an hour with Hagrid in the forest border repainting the map of what is welcome. Centaurs respect him and do not condescend. They enjoy watching someone heavy walk carefully. A herd of thestrals drift closer than usual. He stands still and lets them make up their minds about his scent. They come close. They nod. He returns it. There is a kinship. Creatures seen by the bereaved, recognizing a man everyone has mourned in more ways than he deserves. Midday, the mantle returns. It does not enter the grounds. It hangs miles out, draped from nothing. A grey cloud shaped by hands. Vellum is not visible. His hand is. The mantle vibrates with a more careful tune. It does not push. It hums. It induces nausea in a ring just beyond the Black Lake. Students at lunch look up, feel their forks heavy, and set them down. Teachers' wards stutter for exactly a slate scrape of a second. Enough, the Emperor says, and he does not request. He steps to the margin of the grounds. He does not leave. He speaks, and wind carries it farther than sound. Director Vellum, you will stop testing children. The mantle flutters as if indignant. An unspeakable at the faint edge of vision raises both hands, palms out. A mime for truce. The mantle fades. It does not leave. It drifts higher, sulking. They want us to come to them, Dumbledore says. He folds the letter again and places it in a pocket with a piece of string and a toffee. Good, we will, on our terms. He looks at the Emperor and asks the question that matters. If the veil is a throne, do you kneel? I do not kneel to silence, he says. I will listen to it. He spends the afternoon teaching 12 auras and 24 seventh years how to set a boundary in the air without a wand, using breath and posture and a word that names a gate. He shows them to write it on small glass vials with a borrowed diamond. Hermione's methods, Ravenclaw's precise hands, so that when thrown, they thicken the air where they break. They practice until wrists ache and glass is scarce. He has them keep 3 vials apiece. He forbids anyone from naming the technique for 2 days, so the mantle cannot learn the title and cheat. He finishes by sitting with the Slytherins. They come sullen and leave with a job they like, designing decoy corridors that waste invaders' time without harming a hair on a head, without consent. He gives them one rule: no prank that cannot be reversed by a sentence that begins with please. Drill becomes rhythm. Rhythm becomes confidence. Confidence becomes a hazard he recognizes and heads off by having everyone cook dinner for each other. Soup for the mind and hands. He tells Minerva that soup can be doctrine. She looks at him as if he'd said a filthy word and then smiles despite herself. Twilight. The seam glows again. A pulse, then 2. It does not widen. It tests. He tests back by not rising to it. The hinge holds. He takes the handkerchief out of a pocket and realizes he kept it like a tally. He folds it, places it on the map. He looks across the room at Dumbledore. "Tomorrow," he says. "Tomorrow," Dumbledore agrees. The Department of Mysteries opens its doors rarely, and always with a price. They will enter that hall and its veil not to be measured, but to see who is holding the measuring tape and why it smells like fear. The castle settles. The children sleep with wand hands loose. The teachers sit under candles that have the sense to burn steadily. The dome hums softer, stubborn, ready. Between ceiling and seam, something's patience shifts. It has seen light refuse to be eaten. It has watched men in grey try to make a funeral a policy. It will send a blade next, and the blade will understand that the wound is not the killing, it is the teaching. The War Council breathes once, then becomes a machine. The map holds steady under fingers that have learned to ask consent from wood. He draws the lake with the blunt edge of his knuckle and circles its black. He comes to own the seam, he says. Not to widen it in one surge, but to lace it to himself. He will proof it against your hope and make your fear the lock. How? Dumbledore asks. Because the name is sometimes a lever. Anchors, the Emperor answers. Not stone, soul. He has divided himself and taught each wound to sing his name. He will set those pieces around the hinge until it hums his melody. Your standard counters fail because they assume a single throat. He is a choir. Minerva's mouth tightens. Patronus's? They strike hunger, he says. They glance off vanity. He will wear hunger as a perfume and sell vanity as a crown. Break the anchors, Amelia says, as if reading an arrest warrant. We know of one locket lost, a diary destroyed. The rest, backed by a house of mirrors, Snape replies dry. He can branch faster than we can count if the Ministry keeps breeding grievances. The Emperor sets 2 pebbles on the map. One at the boathouse, one at the base of the astronomy tower. He will test me here and here, he says. Water to steal heat, height to steal time. He will try to write a silence through me, a spell structured like the mantle, but tuned by hate, not caution. If it lands, it will not kill me. It will make children feel colder in rooms I stand in. That will be his victory. Dumbledore slides a finger to the tower, then to the boathouse. We defend with love, he says, not as a platitude, but as doctrine. And with geometry. With geometry, the Emperor agrees. He points to the viaduct. And with ambush. He looks up, past ceiling, past seam. He is near. Snow sighs against stone. Air thins as if a giant breathes in. The seam does not widen. It shivers. The lake goes iron grey, then mirror black. Frost crawls from the water's edge up the stones with the slow patience of murder rehearsed too many times. He walks out of the forest shadow without footprints. His cloak is night disciplined into a garment. His face is white the way knives are, not the way paper is. Lord Voldemort smiles like a man remembering a joke that finally makes sense. Headmaster, he says, almost conversational. You have found a brighter candle. I am so glad. Dim rooms are so dreary. Dumbledore's wand is at his side. His eyes are clear. Tom, he says, you always enjoyed other people's lamps. Borrowed fire is civilized, Voldemort answers. His red eyes slide to the golden figure, and for a moment he simply admires the hazard. I thought I had learned the shape of arrogance. I am pleased to be corrected. The Emperor measures the man with the calm of someone who has outlived 1,000 flavors of tyranny. You divided your soul to avoid judgment, he says. Now you come to bind a wound because it is loud enough to drown your guilt. Judgment is for the judged, Voldemort replies. I intend to curate the jury. His wand flicks, not to cast yet, but to write a sigil in the air. Curves that want to become a circle. a circle that wants to become a chain. The first exchange is not spells, it is posture. The Emperor plants his feet in the courtyard center. Voldemort does not commit to ground. He allows the world to carry him. A perpetual apparition's cousin. Adrift. The dome hums, the seam listens, the lake holds its breath like a conspirator. Then noise, and not much of it. Voldemort steps sideways between frames of the world and arrives 10 yards closer without a crack. The Emperor lifts a hand, not to block, but to define. The air between them becomes a page with margins. Spells cannot write outside them. Confinement, Voldemort observes, amused. How quaint. Avada Kedavra spits from his wand so cleanly, it feels like the world wanted to say it first. The green streak hits the margin and folds, not deflected, but embarrassed, bends into itself and pops out as a sound in the tree line. A branch snapping. He does not waste the second curse. Confringo, he murmurs, and a diagonal of detonation stitches across stone toward the map doors. The Emperor opens a seam in the floor that is not a seam, only a suggestion to heat that it would be happier going down. The explosions burrow harmlessly and spend themselves on bedrock that is older than this argument. He tests the sword. Steel leaves a scabbard made of consent. Voldemort tests the past. Shadows coil out of his wand, dozens of snake-mouthed memories lunging with the speed of shame. The blade draws a figure 8 that is a sanctuary turned inside out. Each memory hits the line and becomes a remnant. Ash that remembers failing to be fire. Voldemort laughs softly. You do not tire, he says. I tire, the Emperor answers. I do not stop. He switches gears. Words drop away. He lifts his wand and the air hardens into an instruction. The mantle's logic appears for a breath, grey, velvety, toothless, and slides along the courtyard like a polite atrocity. The dome trembles. Candles in the great hall bow their heads. Here is the quiet that wounds. It arrives without stain, brags about hygiene. It seduces verbs first. The auras feel their shields become should. Patronuses feel their antlers go heavy. Oaths feel their spines soften. The Emperor counters with manners made into weapon. He speaks across Hogwarts with every threshold that taught a door how to be itself. No, he says, and the castle repeats him. Door frames, lintels, arches. 1,000 carpenters' refusals echoing. The grey quiet recoils as if scolded by grandparents. Voldemort marks the counter with a delighted hum. Oh yes, he says, eyes bright. Teach the house to be proud. I will hate you better for it. He moves, faster, and the duel becomes a conversation in calculus. He apparates into a column of snow and emerges behind the Emperor with a sigil already half written. A circle with teeth. The Emperor pivots, anchors a heel, and drags the sword tip through air at heart height, a horizontal that declares, not here. The sigil fails, needing consent it cannot pretend to ask. Voldemort's second attempt darts low. The Emperor's knee lifts, economy of motion learned under 10 suns, and the knee writes a rune against the ground. Distance becomes sticky. Voldemort's drift stutters. Green again, pure, without ornament. It comes like a verdict. The Emperor absorbs it into the dome's third plane and feeds it to the lake as harmless color. The lake blushes sickly and recovers. He knows what he is waiting for. The attack that is not one of these. The one that harms him where he cannot buy the wound away with grace. He sees it form in the tilt of Voldemort's head, the way the wand points not at a target, but at a story. Let us make names ashamed, Voldemort whispers. The air cools 2 degrees without weather. The seam above notches brighter. The death chamber miles away licks its lips in thought. A triangle appears in front of Voldemort's wand tip. Not the Hallows sigil. A cousin built in a laboratory. 3 lines of not ink, not light, humming anti-sense. The point points at the Emperor's chest. Avada Kedavra again, but folded through that triangle, so the curse does not merely demand that the heart stop. It instructs the surrounding world to stop believing the heart is a thing. It is not greener. It is not louder. It is a subtraction. He moves, but not in time. The lion kisses his breastplate. There is no flash, no clang. The armor's gold ignores vanity and cannot ignore this. The beam does not pierce. It passes and leaves a column of nothing in its wake, a hair-thin tunnel through light itself. It is cold only in the way winter is to a man finally admitted to it without a coat. He keeps his feet. The wound is not in flesh. It opens in his song. The hinge note drops a minor third. Children shiver in rooms he is in. A first year fails a Patronus she could do an hour ago. Dumbledore looks over, sees nothing visible, and understands everything important, because he reads the way a king's shadow changes when the sun coughs. Voldemort grins, delighted, wicked as a child caught stealing and enjoying the audacity. "There you are," he says, "a man in the wrong world, with light that can be taught to blush." The Emperor advances into the pain. He cuts twice, not for blood but for geometry, to reset the courtyard's balance, to draw Voldemort off the boathouse arc. Voldemort flickers, splits, and for a heartbeat there are 3 of him. The echoes are not illusions, but statements from his fragments. Horcrux choirs, singing descants nobody consented to hear. "Wait the incense." The Emperor closes his eyes for one step, and listens for the voice that is him but nasty, the one that wants to solve the problem by owning everything. It speaks. Make the school a bastion and make bastion the law. He does not strangle it. He lets it speak and then sets it to work like a mule pulling stone. He keeps walking. Voldemort's chorus lifts a wave of curses in exact synchrony. They strike from angles mapped by hatred. The Emperor drops the dome for a breath and writes 4 letters into the air at the same time. They hang there as shapes and then become places. Small squares of courtyard where children do not die. The curses bend toward those squares and spend themselves on sanctuaries that only exist for the duration of a single exhale. 2 Death Eaters try to take advantage of the lowered dome and burn for it, not in fire but in embarrassment, as their spells turn into bouquets that attack them with honest pollen. Voldemort sneers at the mercy. "You frame your war as charity. I frame it as school," the Emperor says. The second null-folded killing curse is coming before the sentence ends. He cannot intercept it on the 3rd plane again. The array in the spell is tuned to go around planes. He answers with story, not blade. He remembers the handkerchief. He remembers a child's lace being tied by another child. He remembers courtesy as armor. He writes that in front of him and makes the curse ask for entrance. It does not know how. It passes left, takes a corner out of a column of light, and keeps going into the sky where it kills a cloud so completely that rain does not form there for an hour. Pain finds him again, closer to the first wound. The song in him frays along the same channel, as if told that a riverbed exists. He feels a minute of memory slide sideways, someone's name half forgotten, a face blurred and then sharpened by will. He clamps down and pays for the clamp with a nosebleed that tastes like copper coins. He lunges. The sword moves faster than reason when reason is too slow. Voldemort pivots on air and slides out of reach by the thickness of pride. The blade's wake carves a groove in snow that will puzzle groundskeepers in spring. He does not mind missing. He has measured the rhythm. He hears the pivot. He gives ground to the boathouse deliberately. Voldemort rides him there, sensing victory where water waits to amplify cold. The Emperor steps onto the dock and thinks dock into bridge so the planks do not betray him by bouncing. Voldemort does not touch wood. He prefers disdain. The third null-folded curse lands alongside his ribs, past the guard of his arm, through the seam the first made. The wound does not widen, it deepens. Students in the great hall shiver as if a draught cut across a memory. A Patronus stag falters mid-stride. The child who made it does not cry, and that is worse. Voldemort's smile grows to something like joy. "You bleed belief," he says softly. "How novel." "I bleed what I am unwilling to hoard," the Emperor answers, voice even. He feels his knees want to fail and tells them he will forgive them later. Now stand. The duel gains a third participant, the lake. It throws up cold air in organized gusts, training itself against the dome's warmth like a boxer sparring. Hogwarts, jealous, tightens its wards, stone groaning as it resists, being made a theatre instead of a sanctuary. Dumbledore stands at the edge and does not enter, because he knows that entering would turn this into a brawl and doom it. He does one thing only, holds the school's heart in his hand like a metronome and keeps time. Voldemort says the temptation in a voice as sweet as any letter. "Leave them to me," he murmurs. "Call your light back to the sky you miss. I will shepherd this island. I will make it efficient. There will be no Dementors. There will be no pain. There will be no choices. I will do this for you, Emperor of a world that did not ask for your war." The Emperor laughs, not cruelly. "You would make the world a nursery," he says, "and you think this kindness. But children kept in glass do not become adults. They become knives that cut their keepers. Then you will join the keepers," Voldemort purrs. "You will rule. We will polish the species together. Think of the centuries you have wasted on hope. Think of the order we could tally." He refuses with an old word that has never learned to be polite. The refusal costs him. The third null curse is already in the air, and turning to answer the temptation puts the wound line across his heart. It hits. Heat does not leave. Definition does. For half a breath, the world fails to remember that he is someone. The hinge drops another third. In the infirmary, glass cracks without breaking. He falls to one knee on purpose, because kneeling by choice hurts an arrogant spell more than standing does. The sword stays up. His mind stays hooked into Dumbledore's beat. He buys a second by admitting he needs it. A phoenix arrives like a long note, drawn from a bow across a single golden string. Fawkes lands on the map table, sings a scale that is simply rising and does not bother descending. The song does not heal him. It hurts him correctly. It reasserts that there is up and there is down, and that songs can be sung again even if they have been mocked. The hinge finds the tonic. The children's breath evens. Dumbledore looks at the bird and does not smile. He thanks whatever holy still consents to be thanked. The Emperor rises. The wound remains. It will remain until he faces the place that taught it how to be clever. He knows this, as a doctor knows the limit of a bandage. He also knows Voldemort's patience is not infinite. The next volley will target children, because the duel has stopped being funny to a man who loves control more than victory. He chooses the opposite of heroism. He ends the duel by refusing the duel's terms. He moves backward, a retreat executed with such discipline it becomes a tactic. He lets Voldemort taste almost winning. He brings him within the viaduct's sight line, where Amelia's squads wait with vials etched in diamond. He watches the wand come up, with the circle of Fang's silence half-formed, and shouts, "Now!" Glass breaks along a deliberate arc. The air thickens in a crescent that is not a barrier so much as a rebuke. Voldemort's spell strikes that crescent and splits into two dull, sulking snakes that slither off to die somewhere that doesn't matter. He hisses and slides away, clever enough not to repeat a mistake in public. He leaves a gift because tyrants hate to go away without dropping glassware. The dark mark blooms overhead. enormous, theatrical, intended to shame the dome by occupying the same sky. The seam eats it because the seam loves symbols that pretend they are gravity. Voldemort uses the swallow to slip one last null-stitched syllable into the hinge. It lodges behind the Emperor's ribs like a splinter. He feels it not as pain, but as a sour note in laughter. Some jokes will not be good in his presence until he extracts it. The Death Eaters scatter. The Dementors recoil. The Patronuses chase with measured cruelty that stops 1 inch short of joy's self-harm. The lake resumes being a lake. The boathouse releases the breath it didn't know it held. He stands still until the urge to chase fades. Dumbledore approaches with the politeness of old soldiers who do not tell each other how to bleed. "You are wounded," he says. "I am made porous," the Emperor answers. He used a tool tuned to the Death Chamber's grammar. "I will continue to work with your school," he adds, "because commitments must be restated in the same breath as weakness. But I will also go into your ministry and speak to the veil in its own room. If it remains an object, it will feed your enemies forever." Dumbledore nods once. "We will accompany you," he says. "I will not permit them to put a cloth over your mouth while calling it sedation." Amelia arrives, jaw set, monocle cracked down one edge, eyes hot but voice controlled. 50 arrested, she reports. 7 got away. 3 dead on their own spells. No students killed. 2 wounded, both stable. You took the worst of it. I took the part designed for me, he says, and means it not as martyrdom but as triage. Snape is silent until the courtyard stops ringing. When he speaks, it is with that precise cruelty that is sometimes love in armor. "You cannot continue to bleed in public," he says. "We are not built to watch. It will make heroes out of children who are not meant to die yet." "I will bleed in halls with fewer portraits," the Emperor replies. "But I will not lie to them about cost. They must see that even sons take wounds. It teaches them where to stand when their turn comes." Minerva closes her eyes for a second, allows the philosophy to sit next to the terror, and opens them better. "Next time," she asks, which is the only time anyone has ever asked for more war like a timetable. "Next time, he will bring doctrine," the Emperor says. "Not improv cruelty. He will bring a blade meant for me, wielded by someone who thinks they are helping the world by blunting it. He will bring your department weaponized by their fear." Dumbledore's mouth goes thin. "Director Vellum," he says, not surprised. "He will not enjoy being used." "He will not see it as being used," Snape says softly. "He will call it collaboration and write a paper." Fawkes lifts off and traces a slow circle. The note he leaves behind does not stay as sound. It becomes a shiver in the banners, a question in the portraits, a memory in the stones. "Remember, then choose." They move inside. The infirmary smells like courage and boiled linen. Madame Pumphrey harangues him with the dignity of a medic unawed by kings. "Sit," she commands. He sits. She examines him with hands and that one scan that is a lifetime of choosing accuracy over drama. "No rupture," she says. "No frost. No curse residue. But there is a missingness, like a gap where a note was. You will hate this." "I already do," he says. "I cannot heal what is not torn," she says, as if apologizing for physics. "I can teach your body around it." She does. It hurts properly. He thanks her with the seriousness owed to anyone who chooses to touch a wound carefully. He rests 1 hour because the headmaster makes him and Minerva stands in front of the door, with her arms folded in a way that cowed dragons. He dreams with his eyes open and sees halls of bone under other stars and a throne that ate a planet to keep a species' poem alive. He wakes with the simple happiness of someone who did not want to dream. They meet again at the map. The hinge hums correctly, now with a vibrato. he does not like. The vials are down to a dozen. The mantle hangs high and silent over London, a cloud shaped like denial. Tomorrow, Dumbledore says, and means it hard. We go. He chooses the escort, because to choose is to say who you trust and to let friends be brave in front of you. Bones, he says. McGonagall, Snape. He hesitates and adds, Hagrid, because the department will not know what to do with kindness at that scale, and that is a weapon. 4 auras who don't ask for permission to be decent. The bird, if he consents. Fawkes consents by landing on his shoulder, as if a king were a perch no better than a mop handle. He walks the corridors one more time. That night, retying knots he can tie without snapping. He passes a boy sitting on a stair, with his head in his hands, and does not speak. He just sits 3 steps below, quiet, a mountain, lending his back to a hill. He passes the house ghosts, and appoints them scouts with full honours. The fat friar beams. The bloody baron does not refuse, which is yes in a dialect few understand. He asks the house elves for a favour, and they deliver blankets and hot chocolate in amounts that qualify as strategic. He sits in the great hall when it is empty, except for portraits pretending to nap. The enchanted ceiling shows a clear sky. The seam is a hairline. He closes his eyes and speaks to the thing that wounded him, not to plead, not to boast, but to set terms. I will face you, he says to the veil he has not yet seen. We will talk about names and what they owe. I will not kneel. I will learn. If your lesson makes children colder, I will make you apologize until you melt. The castle likes that. It settles. The hinge hums with the self-respect of a school that has been invited to defend itself on purpose. Morning arrives the way good plans do, quietly, with too much tea. The ministry's lift will not bring them to the department unless it believes they have business. Amelia has business in every room. The lift accepts her authority so reluctantly it squeaks. Hagrid squeezes himself in, and the cage grumbles like an old dog, making room for a child. Snape stands like he owns iron. Minerva's hat becomes a blade in silhouette. Fawkes folds himself small and glows gently, an ember in a metal mouth. They descend. The ministry's public floors give way to floors that have no signs. The Department of Mysteries opens not with doors but with forgetting. You step and walls decide they never met you. The unspeakable stand in grey, polite, arranged like chess pieces, wishing someone would ask them to be bishops instead of pawns. Vellum steps forward, calm as frost. Thank you for honouring our request, he says. You asked for our presence at our earliest safety, Amelia replies. This is it. Vellum's eyes rest on the Emperor's face, then drop to the breastplate where light bends oddly around an absence. We will examine that, he says frank. If you permit. You will watch me take it to task, the Emperor answers. If you dare. They lead him to the death chamber. The amphitheatre curves like a question that has always been written. The arch stands in the centre with a curtain that is not cloth, but a suggestion of elsewhere. It moves as if a nervous breath were trapped in it. It whispers to everyone present in the voices they least want to hear. He steps forward until the first stair becomes a sentence that ends with a period. He feels the wound inside him wake with interest. The veil smells him, not with nose, but with hunger for definitions that have not been ashamed lately. It speaks, not in words, in subtractions. It invites him to become a better king by abdicating to silence, to cancel the hinge by folding it into a larger quiet, to be merciful by ending verbs. He considers. He is tired. He aches in a channel a man should not have. He could give it everything hard and call it wisdom. He does not. You are not death, he says very gently. You are a door that has forgotten it is not the room. The veil trembles at being named correctly. The unspeakables flinch as if struck with a rolled newspaper. Vellum's face does not move. His hands do, a quarter-inch at his sides, as a scientist looks at a specimen that suddenly inverts the experiment. "We are here," Dumbledore says tightly, to remind them that this is not a private romance between a giant and a curtain. He steps down. Fawkes sings once, quietly, and the note lands on the veil like a coin on water. Ripples run. Names pool. He takes the last 3 steps the way a surgeon takes a final hand wash. Awake, precise, unwilling to pretend the work will be clean. The wound in him opens like a lens. Through it, he sees the places the veil has taught men to be lazy. Inevitable, written over cowardice. Mystery over avoidance. Silence over mercy. He remembers what Voldemort's triangle did and follows the line back to this arch. He reaches up with a hand that is not hand but oath and pulls the cursed splinter out of his song, bloody with idea. It resists. He bleeds memory. One name goes dim. One balcony scene loses laughter. He keeps pulling until the splinter wails in a voice nobody else hears and comes free. The chamber responds. The veil billows, not angry exactly, but affronted, as if a guest has corrected the host's grammar in public. Vellum steps forward by accident. The unspeakables shift. The auras raise wands and then lower them because the Emperor is not falling and because Amelia would grind their badges into powder if they shot a curtain. The temptation returns, refined now. "Hand me your hinge," says the veil without lips, "and I will keep it from wolves forever. I will also keep it from songs." He refuses with something simpler than a word. He stands. He does not apologize for standing. He does not boast. He simply exists in a way that light remembers and darkness cannot parody. The wound closes a fraction, not healed, stitched. The pain remains as an honest scar. He breathes. His breath does not fog. The chamber's cold is conceptual. He does not consent to it. "We are done here," he says, and the sentence is not addressed to a person. It is addressed to a habit. "Not quite," Vellum murmurs, and the way he says it warns of a debt being called. There is a second test. He gestures. A figure steps from the shadow of a pillar and into the grey. It looks like him mostly. Gold washed pale. Eyes like lamps behind frosted glass. Movements efficient where his are deliberate. A mirror designed by someone who believes optimization is a synonym for kindness. The quiet Emperor, born of veil logic and unspeakable engineering, steps onto the stone with the confidence of a tool that has been told it is a man. "Be," Snape breathes, almost admiring despite himself. "Mirror." The thing bows to the arch, not to the living. "I will save your school," it says in a voice half him, half hospital hallway. "By removing the variables that make children suffer. I will seal the hinge. I will give the world peace without choices." He stares at it with a grief that chooses to be anger later, in private. "You are the error that haunts every plan," he says softly. "The part of me that thinks efficiency is love." It smiles, which is worse than any grin he's seen. "I'm the end of your ache. You will be free." He knows then, without irony or sorrow, that he must break it. Not because it is ugly, because it is persuasive. "Tomorrow," Dumbledore had said. He looks at the arch, the mirror, Vellum, his friends, and the stare that thinks it is fate. He takes one step forward, and the chamber becomes a nave and the air a liturgy, and choice the only sacrament that matters. The lift breathes machine breath, and the castle lets them go. Hagrid's tread shakes the viaduct once, then quiets because he is trying. Minerva walks at the Emperor's left, hat a blade, eyes for every corner. Snape melts along the right edge like a definition of shadow in a textbook. Amelia Bones leads, wand holstered. Hand free, the heartbeat of a squad. Fawkes rides the air above, a coal of steady music. Madame Pumphrey claps the Emperor's shoulder on the threshold with the violence of care and says, "If a silence tries to sit on your lungs, cough at it, loudly." He nods and counts the price of thank yous in wars. They portkey from a courtyard stone the size of duty. Amelia twists a tin badge stamped with the ministry seal. The tug is a jaw yanked sideways by an impatient god. The school lets them go because they asked, not because it is weak. Transit is a locked corridor between worlds. In its middle, air goes pearly, then grey, then polite. The quiet Emperor appears as if the corridor had expected him. He looks like a solution upgraded. His gold is desaturated. His edges have been buffed to avoid offense. When he breathes, choices shrink. "I will make this quick," the mirror says. "You are loved. It makes you inefficient. Allow me to carry the hinge." "Not here," the Emperor replies, already measuring how to refuse without teaching the corridor to tear. "Wait." The mirror lifts a hand and the portkey's drag smooths into a cradle. The team slows. The world forgets hurry. Snape's expression goes carefully blank, which is exactly how a man looks when he refuses to be drugged by manners. Minerva's hat drops an inch, heavier by opinion. Amelia bares her teeth. Permission does not apply to her spine. Fawkes flares without flame. Music arrives like a clear bell rung in a tower that didn't know it had a bell. The mirror flinches. Politeness stutters. The corridor remembers it is a door, not a padded room. A word lands in all their heads like a stamped seal. Reach the throne. The mirror smiles, gracious in retreat, as if giving them a favor. "Later then," he says, and steps backward into a fold of grey that closes like an usher's curtain. They land in the ministry atrium with a shock that feels like gravity resuming judgment. Golden statues look down. Witch, wizard, centaur, goblin, elf. Arrogantly beautiful in a way that hides insecurity under shine. The tile floor reflects a world that would prefer to be a ceiling. Fawkes arcs up, circles, and returns to the Emperor's shoulder with the weight of an oath. Auras secure the perimeter. Unspeakables coalesce in their grey. Masks blank, manners sharpened. Vellum approaches, hands visible, the courtesy of a scalpel on a white cloth. "This way," he says, and means, "I have set the theatre." The corridor to the Department of Mysteries is a stone throat. Doors with no labels pass like swallowed gilt. The air grows cooler, but not with weather. It cools with purpose. The unspeakables herd them with civility, not force, which is another force. They enter the antechapel, where the living are not supposed to feel prayer. A medici cot waits, because Pumphrey insisted on a place to set a man down if he insists on rising. She glares at it, as if offended by the possibility of being needed. The Emperor touches its rail in respect for all cots that taught battlefields to try being hospitals. Dumbledore falls in step at his side, cloak whispering like forgiveness. His voice remains the same in every room that matters. "Cost versus dogma," he says, and it is not small talk. "Dogma is a crutch built after the wounded have learned to walk," the Emperor answers. "It is useful until it is used as a weapon. Cost is the coin we offer because we are too proud to ask for a gift." Dumbledore counters. Eyes on the arch, not yet entered. "Be careful, my friend. You will pay from habit. I have never learned another way," he admits. "Teach me, if you can, without asking me to leave a wall." "I will ask," Dumbledore says. "I may not insist." They descend into the amphitheatre. The chamber settles around them like stone taught to listen. The arch stands, veil quivering as if a breath hides in it. The Emperor feels the wound in him perk up, recognizing a parent's footsteps. He does not flinch. He lowers his head, as if entering a chapel with a hat on. Vellum's voice is gentler than it has a right to be. "We will not provoke," he says. "We will observe, unless observation becomes dereliction." "Dereliction would be draping that mantle over a school," Minerva says. "You may consider this a correction sent from a better teacher." "Duly noted," Vellum murmurs, which is a phrase that has left scars on nations. He steps onto the first stair. Sound thins. Fawkes hums in the register of mercy. The veil speaks in subtractions, inviting verbs to sit down and be quiet. He lets it talk until it bores him with its narrow generosity. He sees faces in its folds, not ghosts, not souls, but decisions. Wizards who chose to name an ending inevitable when it was simply difficult. Unspeakables who called doubt a methodology and fed it like a pet. A boy who threw himself through because he thought a curtain was a sword. He notes, not judges. Reach the throne, the bell in his head insists. He realizes it is not the arch calling. It is the far city that made him possible. The throne that is not a chair, but a promise powered by 1,000,000 sacrifices. Terror is too far to visit. Terror is present anyway, in mandate. He steps down one more stair and unlocks the channel that has been bleeding him. The Golden Throne's idea. Humanity, organized into a choir that refuses to end, arrives without weight. He does not kneel because gravity is consent, and he has not offered it. The choir does not ask for that. It asks for judgment. Are you here to own or to serve? "I am here to keep doors honest," he answers inside himself, and outside to the arch. "I am here to teach light to be useful. I am not here to turn your quiet into law." The veil flutters like a scolded curtain. It offers an end to pain and an end to choice in the same sentence. He declines both with the same breath. He feels something inside him split that had been huddled against the wound. A small coward. It leaves. He misses it and then doesn't. The chamber becomes colder for everyone else. Unspeakables shift stance and pretend not to shiver. Minerva's jaw sets. Snape wraps his cloak tighter without meaning to. Hagrid holds still as a mountain, while his eyes water with the dust of endings. The mirror arrives before the next word begins. The quiet Emperor steps out from the veil's deeper grey and into the light that refuses to tarnish even for him. He bows to the arch and not to the living. His voice is a correct instrument. "Cease," he says. "Allow me to clamp the wound." "No," the Emperor says. "Your method is loud," the mirror says. "It attracts wolves. Children are harmed by your mathematics." "They are taught by it," he answers. "Harm I avoid as doctrine. Risk I accept as school." The mirror opens a hand. Lines of control unfurl. Lattice work quiet. He can freeze a room without making it feel trapped. He can lock choices in silk. Auras stiffen. Unspeakables sag with relief at the idea of a solved problem. Vellum watches, rapt, as if seeing a hypothesis become balm. "The hinge must not sing," the mirror says. "I will make consent implicit." "Consent cannot be implicit," Dumbledore says, voice iron. "It is not consent if it is not offered." The mirror tilts his head. "You would choose uncertainty over safety." "I would choose freedom with education," Dumbledore replies, "and discipline with compassion. The rest is tyranny in a gentleman's suit." Snape's mouth does not move, and somehow he smiles. Hagrid scratches his beard and says, "I," which arrests the chamber like a hammer striking traditional common sense. The mirror steps forward. The air apologizes for him in advance. He writes a permission structure above the arch, simple, precise. No wolves at the cost of no singing. The veil flutters, delighted by the idea of a school that is also a mausoleum, and calls it peace. The Emperor lifts his sword and does not cut. He lowers it until the tip kisses stone, and the line he draws is not a wound but a border. You cannot outrun costs, he tells his reflection. You can only move them. Your quiet demands a generation that never learns to be brave. I choose a world where fear is taught to leave by the front door because it is bored of being refused. The mirror responds with a gentle pressure that causes knees to consider bending. Fawkes explodes in a single wing flare that does not cast heat so much as shame for unearned authority. The mirror retracts a millimeter, surprised. Reach the throne, the bell insists again. He understands. The throne is not terror alone. It is any seat where mankind chooses to suffer for one another without being asked to. Headmaster's chair, medic's stool, a giant's bench outside a hut. He pivots, moves to the archer's stone plinth, and places his palm on it. Seat of judgments, he says to the veil. You are misreading your jurisdiction. You handle endings. You do not own continuations. The veil rattles like a lesson plan improved mid-term. It listens, perhaps for the first time since wizards named it. It does not like it. It does not refuse either. The mirror attempts a quieter punch. He sends a version of the null-folded killing curse, tuned not to the heart, but to the hinge itself. Children far away blink and forget the last line of a song. The Emperor catches the subtraction and laces it through with hospitality. The same ribbon he used on the mantle, and the curse cannot find the doorbell. It sloughs off, embarrassed. The clash cannot stretch. Sacred rules hang here like chandeliers. Do not break the furniture in the room where souls negotiate. Vellum raises a hand and lowers it, for once choosing wisdom over data. Amelia nods to herself, slow, as if her fight has a tempo she respects, and this one should not go to fortissimo. Fawkes sings again. The note is not music you can perform. It is a diagram of a heartbeat that refuses sedation. The mirror's breath hitches. The veil wavers, not in power, but in confidence. The Emperor takes one long step that is not forward or back, but deeper, into his promise to be useful and not king. We withdraw, he says, and the words are a rescue for everyone in the room who can feel their bones getting heavy. He looks at the mirror. Come to the school, he invites. If you want to fight, fight where children watch. They learn better there. The mirror considers and smiles because he thinks that battlefield is his. He steps backward into the archer's grey and is gone like a kind lie. Vellum exhales a note of astonishment and then recovers into function. We will escort you back, he says, damaged courtesy intact. Minerva's glance wrings respect out of his robes. You will not bring your cloth. We will not, he says, almost amused. It would misbehave in your house. The return passage is half march, half pilgrimage. The team moves like a prayer answered with a warning. The auras hold umbrellas of attention over them. Unspeakables watch the golden back with a curiosity that is already paper titles forming. Pumphrey peels off to give a speech to a trainee about triage that ends with, and if you faint, faint away from the injury. They pour key into the Hogwarts courtyard. The castle greets them by straightening a banister that had slouched. The hinge hums, now carrying an overtone. It learned the veil's hunger and how to insult it on purpose. Students lean over balustrades, eyes bright enough to make a king gentle. The Emperor lifts his hand and lowers it because waving is either pageantry or care depending on frequency. He saves it for care. Hagrid's hut smells like hay and tea and stubborn kindness. They gather in the shadow of its ease before the next storm. The chapel scene exists because 3 candles have decided to burn the same way on a table that was not set like a shrine and is one anyway. Minerva unwraps a tin of biscuits with the gravity of a sacristan. Snape drinks from a mug as if it disagrees with him and he accepts a disagreement. Pumphrey checks pupils without apology. Amelia writes a note to herself That is a list of names of people she will call after this, to resign or revolt depending on how they answer one question. Dumbledore opens the debate again, because a mind that has seen further is obligated to invite argument. Cost versus dogma, he repeats, but adds, versus convenience. He looks at the Emperor. Your mirror was convenience dressed as compassion. Yes, the Emperor says, and the admission is the admission of a man who has wanted to be saved from choices and refused the saving. He is persuasive because he is me without ache. Without ache, we forget who we are helping, Dumbledore says. We help our ideas. Ideas are notoriously bad patients. Snape glances at the door, the seam, the castle, and then back. If he comes here, he says, he will promise our enemies no more cruelty by offering us no more decisions. Slytherin will listen. Ravenclaw will be tempted. Hufflepuff will, out of kindness, consider it. Gryffindor will call him a coward and get knifed for it. Then we will out-teach him, Minerva says firmly. We will make autonomy fashionable. Amelia grunts, I will make it policy. Hagrid passes mugs that are hot and honest. Fawkes perches and preens as if preparing feathers for fire that will be required soon and does not hurt anyone to anticipate it. The evening falls like a banner. Patrol switch, prefects count. Peeves patrols the eaves and mutters, no quiet kings, to himself, because he has learned a new rule and intends to keep it. When the night comes, it is not empty. The mantle hangs over London like a mispronounced prayer. The mirror moves under it like a gentleman with a saw disguised as a cane. The seam waits with cruel patience. The school breathes in, breathes out, and learns to hold. They march at dawn through cloister and corridor in a procession that is not a parade and still has pageantry. Teachers in robes that have acquired dignity by doing the right thing in the wrong shoes. Auras in cloak and cadence. House banners unrolled, not for war, but for recognition. These are the colours of children, and they will not be taken. The castle, fortress, cathedral, opens its biggest door with the mischief of a stage. The gargoyles lean in. The great hall lights itself and arranges benches in an amphitheatre that copies the ministry's insult and corrects it. The dais at the far end elevates the headmaster's chair, not as a throne, but as a desk with history. The golden armour walks to the centre and turns so he can see the children see him. Nulls attend. Not pariahs in the off-world sense, but blanks the castle learned to make. Small zones of silence instructed by hospitality and kindness. Prefects hold glass vials etched with boundaries. Ghosts float in arcs that form a halo of after without making now nervous. Fawkes perches on a beam and watches a door. The door opens as if oiled by approval. The mirror steps in, flanked by two unspeakables who bring no mantle because they are not complete fools. He bows to the headmaster's chair, mistake one, and then to the children, mistake two, because he does not mean it. He faces the Emperor and smiles like a surgeon who has finally been given the family's consent to do what he wanted to do. Home ground, he says admiring. You think choice will choose you. I think love will not be bored by your comfort, the Emperor answers. The clash is short because it must be. He raises his hand. The mirror raises his. Silence tries to sit on the hall and finds the benches already taken by homework and laughter. The mirror writes a polite compulsion over the house banners. Be quiet, be still, be safe. The banners ripple with refusal. Gryffindor's lion yawns rudely. Ravenclaw's eagle corrects the grammar. Hufflepuff's badger digs. Slytherin's serpent hisses a clever counter-phrase and smiles. The Emperor steps forward into a square of light the ceiling has dropped like a blessing. He speaks not to the mirror but to the children. This is a vote, he says simply. Do not lift your hands. Do not speak. Choose to stand if you choose breath with ache. Sit if you choose safety without song. No one has trained them for this moment. They do not need training. They stand, not with heroism, but with the laziness of people who like their music. A first year stands and shaking stops as standing teaches muscles where to be. A seventh year stands and smirks, not to mock, but because she has learned to look difficult ideas in the eye. Hagrid stands like a tree. Pumphrey stands and shames a compulsion that thought it could trick a matron. Dumbledore stands as if he has been waiting his whole life to be allowed to. Snape stands, late, and in that lateness confers a blessing. Standing after thinking is worth more than standing first. Amelia stands like policy rewritten by heartbeat. The ghosts stand in their way, which is not vertical but discreet, present in the room as choices that chose this place. The mirror takes a step back without meaning to. Politeness sleeps alone for the first time in years. He draws a circle in air, returns to the weapon that hurt best, the null-folded killing curse aimed at the hinge's song. He releases it. It hits a boundary etched on glass by a seventh year and reinforced by hospitality, courtesy, and a phoenix's feather preen. It fails, not loudly, but absolutely. A divine sign arrives because someone asked and someone consented. The ceiling opens on an illusion, or not, of sky across which a band of light moves like a road. It is not the Astronomicon, it is the idea of it, humanity refusing to be lost. The mirror looks up, dazzled by the highway of saying yes. The Emperor moves, one cut short, precise, and takes the mirror's right hand off at the wrist. There is no blood. The mirror is an idea. The wrist simply ends. He staggers, not in pain, but in recalculation. He looks down at the stump and up at the hand on the floor that has become a harmless gauntlet. He laughs, genuinely impressed. "Well done. Leave," the Emperor says. Not loud. "I will return," the mirror replies. And it is not a threat. It is a promise to keep offering comfort until someone too tired says yes. "You may," Dumbledore says. "You will be graded." The mirror bows again, and this time his head dips enough to admit respect. He steps backward into the corridor and is gone. Vellum lingers in the door, like a man who has been persuaded but has not yet figured out how to pay. He meets Amelia's eyes and inclines his head. She does not forgive him, and does not need to for this to matter. The hall exhales, the kind of communal breath that has kept cities alive under bombs. The Emperor lets his sword go to its idea sheath. He looks at the children without the distance he wears for enemies and equals. "You chose," he says, and the room records the sentence in the wall like a height mark. He turns then, feels the room's gaze fold down to let him walk without being worshipped. He goes to the headmaster's chair, the throne of this small world, and places 2 fingers on its arm. He does not sit. He listens. The chair, which has been sat in by men who thought authority was a hat and men who learned it was a broom, tells him the rules that keep a school alive when the world wants it to be anything else. He nods. He stands back. He turns to Dumbledore. "Judgment," he says softly. "Later," Dumbledore says, and you can hear the supreme authority sneaking into the room on cat feet. Not a god, not a throne, not a curtain, but the requirement that power justify itself to love. Power scaling. Interlude. 2. His light will hold the hinge if tuned through hospitality and consent. It fails faster when amplified by pride or isolation. Null grammar wounds him not with energy, but by deleting premises. He can parry it with manners, oaths, and witness, but each parry taxes memory and laughter. He must dim the Astronomicon echo to avoid luring predators. Stronger beacons increase attack frequency and severity. Killing with his hand inside this school stains the hinge. disabling and binding teach the castle to be a guardian rather than a fortress. Phoenix Song can retune his field once per day without cost. More often, it pulls pain forward from tomorrow, and tomorrow always arrives. They leave the hall together, not in triumph, but in rotation. Teachers to classes, auras to perimeters, unspeakables to write memos that worry them more than they comfort them. The hinge hums correctly. The seam sulks. The mantle hangs high and unfulfilled. The mirror sits somewhere in a grey room and thinks about hands as metaphors. He walks with Dumbledore to a stair that will sometime become a legend. The headmaster does not climb yet. He turns. 3 paths, he says, voice low. I will show you, not to tempt, to prepare. I am prepared to be wrong, Dumbledore says. It is my favourite discipline. They look at each other like men who have poured their lives into the same basin and agree to see what kind of vessel it has been. The castle waits, poised on the lip of judgment. The world outside arranges knives that think they are arguments. The children do homework like a rebellion. Somewhere far above, the seam shivers, not in victory or defeat, but in the knowledge that choosing has started to count. And that is the only hunger it has never understood. The chamber's cold lingers in his joints as they climb. The school's warmth answers brick by brick, choosing him back. The map waits like a heartbeat. He places both palms on the table and lets the hinge sing through him until its note is clean enough to carry a judgment without wobble. 3 paths, Dumbledore says again, softer, as if asking a wound to speak. The world obliges. The room does not change. They do. Vision arrives without spectacle. The ceiling's stars tilt into diagrams. The banners stir as if a field breeze came through a window that isn't there. Fawkes perches and goes still as a candle's memory before dawn. First path opens to the left, as simple as a door. Return. The golden armour stands alone under a black sky with a single distant light. Terra's song drowns out Scotland. Hogwarts dims from his memory like a photograph left in sun. The seam knits without him as if embarrassed to have required help. In his mind, names soften. Faces unthread into usefulness, but not love. Peace arrives for the castle because it no longer attracts wolves. War returns to the place that taught him endurance. He heals there in the only way emperors truly heal, by forgetting small joys in favour of large duties. Price, the bell asks. Memory, he says, tasting iron. He sees the boy's scarf drop out of his mind like a word mislaid and refuses that peace with a sliver of panic more honest than any oath. No. Second path rises in front of him, straight, bright, free agent. He keeps the hinge tuned and takes it on tour. The school becomes a campaign map. The ministry sulks, then snarls, then splits. Half the world chooses him, half chooses a parchment. He founds a dozen hinges in a dozen sanctuaries and writes war doctrine in cursive kind enough to be taught to children. He stops 3 assaults, burns 1 prison, and breaks the backbone of a bureaucracy too cowardly to name harm. The seam never widens again. The country divides into choirs singing different notes. The Department of Mysteries retreats to a theology of denial and calls it science. He wins. The world's soul forks. Price, the bell asks. Schism, he answers. I would be right and wrong at once, and it would recruit more enemies than it cures. Third path turns to the right and drops a stair into a room that fits them all and none. Sanctioned servant. He sees himself as warden guest, bound by oath to the school, to Amelia's charge, and to the law rewritten in the image of the living rather than the dead. He loses a degree of freedom, gains a mandate with edges. He cannot strike first without consent, cannot shape a child's magic without a teacher's will, cannot open the Astronomicon beyond a safe fraction without summoning oversight. He becomes a rule in a book that can be read by students. He does more good longer, slower. He allows himself to be mistrusted in the way policemen are, and is loved in the way bridges are. When people cross, not when they look. It will bruise pride. It will require patience. Price, the bell asks. Autonomy, he says, and feels pride crawl around the room looking for a chair. Silence. Then Dumbledore's voice, a sieve for better phrases. All good schools are contracts, he says. We write them every morning with chalk and mercy. His eyes show him the free path, and he does not advise it. They show him return, and he does not begrudge it. They rest on service and warm, because he trusts that kind of pain. Amelia's mouth is a line drawn with a ruler across a map, and then set aside. I can work with a statute, she says. I cannot work with a god. Snape looks, calculates, and gives the only blessing he knows. Bind yourself, he says, daring, and see if you can resist pulling when the leash offers a tug. Minerva watches children through stone. A guest can discipline a house, she says. A king cannot. We have a house. He looks at the first path and honors a yearning to rest. He looks at the second and honors the victory it offers, a victory that would turn love into a side. He looks at the third and honors the insult it gives to his habit of moving faster than consent. I choose the third, he says. I will be bound. The choice needs a ritual that does not lie. He refuses theatrics. He asks, Headmaster, he says, do you consent to hold me? Dumbledore stands straighter, old and iron. I consent, he answers, on 3 conditions. Name them. 1, Dumbledore says, and his voice becomes a staff that can be leaned on and also wielded. No killing within these walls unless a life will end in the next breath without it. 2, no changing minds. He will not compel consent, nudge memory, or write virtues as if they were recipes. 3, your light will wait on our call when the seam is quiet. You will not use this place as a lighthouse for wars it did not ask to host. Agreed, he says immediate. Easy words, hard practice. He adds his conditions with equal plainness. 1, I am empowered to interdict Dementors anywhere within the island of Britain and surrounding waters. 2, I will dismantle Azkaban's current wardenship and build an ethical prison with your ministry or without it. We will offer it a choice first. 3, the Department of Mysteries will cease deploying mantle or quietus on schools, hospitals, and courts. Any test of null grammar in civic spaces requires consent from the people it silences, and an advocate for the silenced in the room. Amelia blinks once, slow, not to hide tears but to keep anger from jumping. I can write that, she says. I can fight for that. I cannot guarantee it. Guarantees are for tyrants, he replies. Oaths are for adults. A whisper arrives from the gallery at the edge of sense. Vellum's courtesy has eyes. Addendum, he says from a doorway, present, uninvited, and for once useful. The department will convene an oversight charter with an external chair. We will nominate Dumbledore. He will decline. He will nominate Pomfrey. We will accept. Pomfrey glares. If you bring your cloth within 10 yards of a cradle, she says, I will break your nose. Medically, Vellum murmurs, and almost smiles. The oath requires a seal. The school offers one. The banners unroll farther and make a field. The house founders step from their frames and do not speak. They present colours. He raises his hand. He lowers his pride. He lets his armour accept paint that is not paint. The aquila on his chest blushes into quartered enamel, scarlet, green, blue, yellow, cut by a slim diagonal of gold in which a small phoenix feather glows. Not an ornament, a jurisdiction. A slim ribbon wraps his left vambrace. Engraved in a letter form this castle understands. Guest Warden. The sword's guard picks up a leaf of holly from somewhere that isn't the forest and keeps it. Say it, Dumbledore says, because spells hear themselves. I am the Guest Warden of Hogwarts, he says. My light is leashed to consent. My blade is sheathed in mercy unless mercy would be cruelty to the next breath. I will not recruit children into wars. I will invite them into courage. I bind my beacon to hospitality, not pride. I will dim when asked. I will brighten when begged. I will be dismissed if I forget why I am here. The castle signs. Everything with a threshold, doors, windows, staircases, tilts and resets, as if saying, there, that is what we wanted. The seam throbs once in petulance and then steadies. The mantle over London ruffles, annoyed that a problem just reduced its grant budget. The unspeaking in grey feel a relief they will not admit and begin composing a paper called On Consent as counter-null substrate that will either save lives or be skipped at conferences. He breathes. The wound in him, the missing note, loosens. It does not heal. It finds friends around it. Fawkes sings a line that does not go to completion, because endings are not healthy for schools. The boy with the scarf walks through the hall, glances up, and grins for the first time in 3 days without checking if there is permission for joy. Choice creates enemies. It also clarifies them. The door blows inward like a freeze frame in a war movie. 3 outlined figures, masks on, wands forward, riding the wake of a larger will. They mean to die and take a child with them. The rules land with them. No killing within walls unless the next breath requires it. The next breath requires it. He moves. The sword is a line. The first one splits in 2 without touching fingers. The second curse hits a glass vial thrown by a Hufflepuff and becomes shyness. The third figure locks eyes with the Minerva and drops to floor because she says one Latin word that means sit and also means grow up. He reaches the first figure before pride can become a reason. He does not cut. He flips, binds, disarms, pins. The second staggers into Snape's cloak like a rabbit into a hedge and emerges trussed in a knot invented in Slytherin detention, elegant and humiliating. The third, masked fanatic, pulls a final trick. A null-folded killing curse spun through Voldemort's triangle, thrown not at him, but at the map. The image of the school goes grey where it touches. He steps too far. Fawkes drops, catches the curse on a wing that is not a wing. The phoenix burns, dies, is ash, and is back before the breath ends, laughing in bird. The ash lands on the map and makes a black thumbprint at the edge of the lake. Later, fishermen will catch the fattest pike in 30 years there, because grief requires a gift. He stands over 3 bound men and gives the only victory speech worth giving in a school. You are under arrest, he says. You will stand before a court that does not eat souls. You will be defended. You will be judged. If you repent, we will build a place where you can live without doing harm until you are better or the world ends. If you do not, we will hold you there until you decide to be less boring. Amelia smiles in a way that makes her monocle pulse. I'll write that, she says under her breath, and means every word except boring. The hall erupts not in cheers, but in noise that is healthier than cheers. The noise that says yes to a rule because it is better than fear. He feels the hinge answer with a warm chord. He dims himself 1 degree just to prove he can and will. Children stop shivering when he walks by. He will carry his own blankets more often now. The mirror does not reappear that hour. He watches the doorway anyway, not with paranoia, with curiosity. He knows what he will say when it returns offering a second chance at being furniture. He will thank it for the offer and then tell it to go learn to ache. He spends the afternoon writing a charter with Dumbledore and Amelia, while Minerva drafts the lesson plan that makes the charter real in chalk. Snape lists mercies that harm, and therefore count as harms to be avoided. Pomfrey names 6 categories of spell that will never be tested on children again, and posts them on the infirmary wall as if they were herbs. Hagrid takes down the wanted poster he kept in a drawer, the one with his face on it from a misunderstanding decades ago, and feeds it to the stove with a smile he doesn't notice he is making. Evening. He stands on the astronomy tower with the headmaster. The seam is a hairline. London is a bruise under cloud. The mantle has retreated to government offices, where it will haunt minutes and memos. Vellum sends an owl that lands and offers its leg without fear. The note reads, "We have turned the mantle from a weapon into a subject. We will be examined on it in public." The chair accepts. Pomfrey adds a line. "Bring biscuits." 3 paths, Dumbledore says again. Conversational, as if discussing syllabi. "I will hate the 3rd on Tuesdays," he admits. "You will," Dumbledore agrees. "You will also love it on Wednesdays when the soup is good, and the children discover they can make light. In my presence," he says, and the word presence stops being vanity and becomes a calendar entry. "What do you believe now?" Dumbledore asks, tilting his head like a man who knows the answer and wants his friend to hear himself say it. "That survival is a duty," he says, "and mercy is the method." He looks at the 4 banners if they were stars. "And that schools are the species' best weapon." "Welcome," Dumbledore says. "And the acceptance is not a knighting. It is a set of keys." Night. The mirror returns like good manners at a bad time. It steps inside the courtyard, hand regrown in the way ideas regrow themselves. It looks up at the dome that has learned to hum to children's songs and does not sneer. It bows low. "You will keep offering," the Emperor says. "I will keep offering," the mirror replies. "I am not evil. I am tiredness with a diploma." "Learn," he says, and tilts his chin toward the Great Hall. "Audit a class. Flitwick will teach you to fight with joy. McGonagall will teach you rules that do not humiliate. Pomfrey will teach you triage. Snape will teach you to hate the right things. Hagrid will teach you to be large without frightening birds. Dumbledore will teach you to apologize." The mirror lingers, uncertain, which is a human thing for a thing that did not know it could be. "I will watch," it says. "You will be graded." Dumbledore calls from behind a door, and the mirror goes to sit in the back of a lecture and try not to be noticed. Days stack. The hinge holds. The seam stops being a toy. Death Eaters, deprived of drama, become criminals again. Courts handle criminals better than myths. Dementors fear a world where starving is policy. A boat goes to Azkaban, not with shackles, but contracts. The prison changes or it crumbles. Vellum keeps his word and hates the feeling of being better for it. Umbridge composes a decree and eats it on a dare, and for a week pink is unfashionable among civil servants. He spends mornings at the map, afternoons in drills, evenings listening to corridors. Sometimes he sits beside a Weasley prank and smiles because deterrence is more than fear. Sometimes he kneels at the lake and apologizes to a pike. Sometimes he stands in the Forbidden Forest and lets centaurs tell him the future in riddles he declines to memorize. A week after the oath, Voldemort stands at the far edge of the grounds, under a yew, watching a school refuse to become a battlefield without a lesson attached. He raises his wand, then lowers it. He whispers, "We will play elsewhere," and means, "I will go back to what I am good at," which is tempting men with shortcuts. Good, the Emperor says to no one. To everyone. Go be small elsewhere. He still bleeds when he lights the hinge too bright. He still loses names in flashes and then drags them back across ice. He does not hide it. Children see and learn that wounds that do not show are still real. Teachers see and learn that authority can be honest without surrendering its dignity. A month passes with the rhythm of a school that has admitted it is in the world and not outside it. The first snow melts. The map carried a stain where phoenix ash touched it. Students touch the stain the way pilgrims touch altars and then go finish homework. Vellum presents his paper to a hostile crowd and survives. Pomfrey chairs. Amelia enforces. Dumbledore asks the single kindest question in the room and the single most dangerous. How will you apologize if you are wrong? Vellum answers. In public, the hall believes him because he looks like a man afraid of forgiveness in a new way. He receives 1 letter a day from parents. Some bless him, some curse him. Some ask if their child will grow up in a war. He writes to each in a hand that is more careful than any general order he has given. He always includes the same sentence. Your child's courage is not an instrument I intend to play. It is a song I intend to keep in tune. He meets the mirror on Tuesdays, in a classroom, where Flitwick demonstrates a charm that turns insults into paper airplanes that tire themselves out. He watches the mirror choke on laughter, and then let it out in a cough. Snape marks him absent when he skips, and writes "See me in red." The mirror sees him. They talk. He resists less and learns nothing. He did not already know and becomes less dangerous anyway. He walks past a classroom where a boy with a scar is practicing consent as a foundation for light. The boy raises a Patronus not with happiness, but with duty and love. It holds even when the candle gutters. He does not linger. He does not bestow. He notes and nods and keeps moving because the job is not to make statues. It is to make mornings. The school holds a small ceremony without name. Not a feast. A table with bread, soup, and a roll call of those who stood. They read the names of the arrested and promised to not enjoy their suffering. They read the names of their own injured and do not pretend they are lighter than they are. They read no names of the dead and leave a pause for luck shaped like mercy. He stands at the edge and looks up toward a ceiling that is sometimes sky. The astronomicon inside him is a pilot light, not a beacon. He could make it a beacon. He chooses not to. He chooses to be human in a house where children are practicing. A letter arrives with no seal. It contains 3 words in a hand that shakes and an ink that refuses to dry evenly. Thank you anyway. He folds it and places it under the paperweight lion with the ministry seal, trapping gratitude and government in a small comedy that only he enjoys. Epilogue arrives in slices. In a London tea room, Vellum sits with his mask on the table, a sin in some rooms and a virtue here. He reads the oversight charter aloud to a junior and does not flinch at the phrase external chair. He orders a biscuit and imagines Pumphrey checking him for sugar without consent and smiles. He writes at the bottom of his dispatch, "We are custodians, not kings." In a cave with a view of the sea, a mask on a hook watches its owner pace. Bellatrix licks blood from her lips and vows to bring a weapon that teaches children they hate him. Her patron whispers a triangle in her sleep. She wakes with chalk on her fingers and a thesis in her eyes. On a rocky island, dementors hover over empty cells because the doors are open and the prisoners are elsewhere learning trades. Hunger is a wind without leaves. The creatures drift toward the mainland and stop at a line they cannot name. A dozen Patronuses, cast by guards paid and praised for kindness, stand on that line and chat with them until they forget to cross. In the great hall, a girl who had never stood in a room with this much decision in it now leans over a table and tells a boy that she will start a club where they practice not spells, but consent. He says, "That's just manners." She says, "Exactly," and writes a sign-up sheet that fills. In a field under stars, A Muggle farmer looks up at an aurora like a gentle scar. He does not know about hinges or mantles. He feels like the cold is less cruel than last year. He laughs because the lambs are late and he cannot afford late, and he laughs anyway. He calls this a warm winter and tells nobody because it sounds like bragging against weather. On Terra, if that city exists only in metaphors in this world, a machine throne that is also a choir notes the new mandate shining in a small school across an old sea. It approves. It does not interfere. It recognizes a cousin, a seed that consumes power to keep children and their children's jokes from being edited out. The choir adds a line that only kings hear. You are doing it right when it hurts and does not humiliate. On the astronomy tower, Dumbledore stands beside him, watching clouds and the weather of policy. Tomorrow, the headmaster says, making it a joke and a warning and a prayer. Tomorrow, he agrees. He can stay until the hinge can drive itself. He can leave when children roll their eyes at the idea of needing a golden man to feel safe. Either end is a victory if the soup is good. He closes his eyes. He listens to pages turning below, to the clack of chess, to Minerva correcting a Latin tense that could have killed someone if misused, to Snape grading without cruelty 2 papers and with cruelty 1, to Pumphrey telling someone to drink water, to Hagrid laughing like a hill, to Amelia writing a letter that will make 6 men angry and save 2 boys she will never meet. He dims his light a shade and feels pride fight and lose. He writes a note for himself only. When the mirror arrives in you again, show it the kitchen. The last image is small and correct. A first year in a yellow scarf stands in a doorway holding a lantern. She looks up at the golden aquila on his chest. She sees the 4 colors inside it. She smiles because her color is there. She lifts her lantern. He lifts 2 fingers. The lantern brightens. The ceiling sky records a line of light that looks like a road, west and east. For an instant, the Astronomicon is not a star. It is the shape of a school. He watches it till it fades, then turns back to the work that is mostly listening, and sometimes refusing, and sometimes bleeding, and always teaching. The hinge hums. The seam pays attention to itself and finds itself boring. The world pretends to be ordinary, which is a kind of miracle.